allow you to, yeah. Yeah, there are 3, 4 attendees. Okay, that's good. Oh, it's quite a few. Okay, goodbye then. See you on the other side. See you on the other side.
Oh, folks. Hi, Adam. Hello.
Can you hear me, Sam?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yes, very well, thank you. Hi, Richard. I saw Richard in the chat there.
Okay, so yes, we're here. Got what 22 people so far. Well, delegates so far.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, I think between now and 7 o'clock is networking. So I'm not sure how you do virtual networking, but
Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do.
yeah. So I'm not sure if if the delegates are able to talk to themselves. Let me see. Oh, okay. Let me just look at someone that I can allow them to talk. Okay.
A few people are us there on the delegates list, on the participants list, guys. Good evening to you. Hope you're all well.
Okay. Okay. So now I'm trying to work out how to get. Hello. Hello.
This is the best bit, the technical problem, Sam.
Yeah. No, I think we're fine. I think okay, let me see if anyone is writing here. Hi, Richard. Yeah. Hi to all. Yeah. Good evening, Kate Smith. Okay. Oh yeah. So yes, I understand they can hear us clearly. Okay. Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Adam?
Yes, sir. Can you find Sam?
Just the two of us.
Loud and
Okay.
clear?
Yeah, no, someone has got their hands on. I'm trying to get them to talk.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see. Okay, I have a problem with my mic. Okay, there's someone here. My mic. That's Mohammed. Okay. Yeah, I think he has a.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you, Roy. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, excellent. Yes, Roy. Yes, I've enabled you. Hi, Roy. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, good. Please, do you want to introduce yourself so we can know who you are, Roy?
Yeah, well, Roy McPrepple, a private landlord, own a small portfolio, and in the throes of, under these unprecedented conditions, I'm not sure what's going to happen now, but in the throes of growing the portfolio. So I'm very keen to learn how best to grow the portfolio as far as a business structure or a family business. And really, that's why I thought it would be very interesting for me and others to learn how to do that, to grow it to the next stage.
Okay, great. I've just seen a comment here from someone saying your voice is echoing. I'm not sure if it's the room you're in.
It is the room. I'm actually in a large dining room, so
Okay.
I do apologise that I haven't got a smaller room.
Yeah, I've seen someone make a comment here saying you are okay. So thank you, Roy. We look forward to your comment so I'll mute you now and then move to the next person. Yeah, to get some
Okay.
virtual networking going. Okay. Hello, hi, Afua.
Hi.
Yes, okay, yes, your turn. Yes.
Well, I'm interested in properties and I'm open to everything and ready to learn and grow when the time is right.
I don't know if we've lost Sam there slightly, maybe, but interesting choice of words. I feel I know what you mean, because maybe you don't feel like maybe today is exactly the right time, but then maybe it is. Maybe it is.
No, it's not really that it's not the right time. I've started with rent to rent and I'm hoping to build on it and then move on to owning some assets. And so
That makes sense. That's a good way in. Definitely, it's a way in that. It's the way a lot of people get in, and it's perfectly legitimate to do that. And I always say it's a good idea to get into the asset ownership bit, because in normal times, not like the unprecedented times as Roy was saying that we're having, but in normal times, that's the bit that can make you rich in your sleep, and that's ultimately what we like to try and do. So we work hard for our rents. We're working even harder for them at the moment. But hopefully the capital growth bit in the long run is the bit that really makes us the money. Now, I don't think I've got the power to do what's that. Oh, here comes Sam. He's back. Jolly good. Hi, Sam.
Hello, hi, Afua.
yes.
Yeah, I think I lost you for a second. Yeah. Adam.
Yeah, we lost you, Sam. I think we did talk just then, so it was working, but you were
Yes,
offline.
for some reason, yeah, it just went off. I had to restart the Zoom. So okay, Afua, I missed your intro. What's the experience on your side? Afua, my first time of being a host. How is it on your end?
In what sense?
In terms of what can you see? What's the experience?
Okay, the line is clear now and I can see you and I can see the other speaker.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Do you want to just say what you do and who you are so everyone can listen to you?
Okay, I have started service accommodation via rent to rent. And just when I was beginning to get my teeth into it, this COVID-19 thing has started. But I'm believing that it's a passing phase and I'm ready to ride the storm.
Excellent. Well, I was just going to ask you, how are the challenges affecting you? And you just mentioned the COVID word. And like you said, yeah, we're all in this together. And I guess Adam will be sharing some strategies with us, how to stay on your feet, stay grounded. And we're all in this together. And we'll definitely, like you said, ride the storm together. Adam?
Absolutely, yeah. That's what it's all about at the moment, Sam. And I think things like this, while we can all do our social distancing bit from home, but this is, you know, these are the times. You know, I've got 2 degrees, both of which have got quite a lot of economics in them, and I'm quite a big fan, exciting chap that I am, of economic history. And this is economic history right here being created. And in many ways, this morning I've been spending most of today and the last few days really between contingency planning, risk management, risk measures, coming up with a few new metrics that I didn't really know were so relevant, and also talking to people contacts that I've built up over the years, people who I really, really respect and who I really feel know what's going on, or might know what might be about to go on more critically. And on the bright side, you know, property at the moment is holding up well. It obviously moves slower than things like the equity markets, but I don't think we're in anywhere near as much trouble as people who are absolutely heavily exposed to the stock market are. And we don't know yet whether we've seen the bottom for the equity markets either. We'll see how it affects the property buying. But I've got a few frontline businesses that are obviously providing me with real-time information about lettings and about sales. And so far, we've only had one thing fall apart, and that was only on the basis that the people who were purchasing a property were going to do it on a bridge because they really, really liked it. Now they've just got a bit more cautious and they're going to wait until they've sold their own property. So we're probably only 10 days or less really into this country taking it really, really seriously. But we are seeing some positive messages through from people as well about how they feel their job's secure, and how they're pressing on with purchases and things like that. So nothing to lose your head about at the moment, but ultimately the next sort of 3 to 6 months, I think it's going to be really, really important to keep talking, stick with the online communities and the online information, and just stay positive, really.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Afua, yeah. So we went to speak to you again during the Q&A session. Richard. I've just got Richard here. Who else wants to have a quick talk? We still have a bit of 15 minutes of networking. I think there were a few hands up actually.
I don't know if you can.
Oh yeah, no, I think I've got Richard, but I'll mute him. Let me give him the right to talk.
Yeah, that's it.
Richard, on mute. Hi, Richard.
Oh, good evening. Good evening.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, now you can talk. Richard, I've got so much power today, you know.
Oh man.
I can decide who talks. That's good.
But the big question is, do you know where to find toilet roll?
Oh, wow, that's a bigger question. Yeah.
That is the biggest question out there right now. Hi, good evening. My name is Richard Woodstock. I'm a London landlord, an IT consultant, and I'm an eternal student of property, really. I have been through a couple of recessions. The last one, I was in property, but not really that actively. This time around, I wouldn't say that I'm ready, because I don't think you ever are for this sort of thing. But just through coincidence, I happen to have incorporated and refinanced and sitting in cash at the moment. I'm in a really weird position where I'm quite keen to do something and do something meaningful, but don't want to get it wrong, basically. So I'm a big fan of Adam. I go along to the Partners in Property. I think it's fantastic. and I listened to your broadcast that you did with Rod Turner. I
Thanks,
thought that
Richard.
was awesome as well.
Thank you for the shout out. That's brilliant.
Oh, you're very welcome. So it's interesting to hear that you say that, you know, you're a student of people who know what's going on. I'm here to listen to you, hoping that you know what's going on.
Well, I've collated all their information, Richard, and I'm going to disperse it to you guys. That's the whole point. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you, Sam, for putting it on, and thanks, Adam, for joining us.
Yeah,
No,
and then, by the way, to everyone, Richard runs the Ealing Property Meet, which is a very interesting meet for anyone that networks in West London. I love attending it. It's very friendly, very knowledgeable, great. Of course, you presented not long ago, isn't it, Adam?
I haven't been there yet. No,
Haven't
Richard.
been. Okay, no.
Now I know Richard's a big fan. He's definitely going to ask me once we can do these things in person again. Anyway.
No, it's a great crowd. Great crowd.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be an absolute honour, Adam. And thanks for the shout out, Sam. I appreciate that.
I think I've got a few people here. Agnes. Okay. Thank you. Let me get Agnes to talk. Okay. Hello. Hi, Agnes. Hello.
I think you need to unmute her, Sam.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
Oh, there we go.
Is it on? Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Agnes. Yeah, go on to talk. You have the floor now to talk.
Hi, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, so I have a buy-to-let HMO property in London, and my concern currently is how to manage with paying for utilities bills, mortgages, if the tenants stop paying their rent. And I've also got some few rents to rent as well. These are hard times. And I was about to start embarking on buying properties, and I'm very cautious and concerned if, you know, it's actually a good idea to go ahead.
Hang on, just hold on, Agnes. No, right now it's not yet the Q&A. It's just networking. Just talk about yourself, what you do, what you intend to learn, or what do you want to find out today. But really, the Q&A will be after Adam's presentation. But for now, it's just networking. Just say who you are, what you do, so that we can know who you are. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm Agnes Barry, and I manage some properties in Colchester, and I also have my own HMO properties. And I'm looking forward to this session just to kind of like gain some knowledge and ideas and network with people and understand how they're coping currently with all the issues that are going on.
Okay, great. Yeah, okay. So okay, let me I'll move on to the next question so that we can just get a few people to introduce themselves before we start the presentation. So Agnes, thank you. So I'm going to mute you now and then move on to the next person. Okay, I've got a few hands. I've got Khalid. Yeah, Khalid, you've got the space now.
Yes. Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes. You can just tell us who you are, what you do, so I'll just get to know you, and then we'll get to Q&A later.
Yes. Hi everyone. Hi Sam. Hi Adam. This is the second time I see Adam. Also, I came to the last, and I think in the Wembley Hilton. It was an amazing event. We learned a lot from Adam, honestly. I used to work in a state agency in central London from 2007 to 2010, and then
You didn't come up in there.
Yeah.
sorry?
I said Zoom.
Yeah. So then
Yeah,
I run a rent to rent.
The ask question.
Sorry, there's other people.
Okay, no, I've muted them. Sorry, I didn't. I should have. Okay, no, that's fine. You're now fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did before rent to rent in 2010 up to 2015 for like 30-40 flats in central London. Then I sold my shares to my partner, and now I'm a landlord. Hello.
Yes. Yeah. Can it go on? Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but
No, I think the other lady was talking about Agnes, but I've muted her now. She didn't know that she was on. Yeah. Okay.
yes.
Go on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, and then I'm doing now acquisition service for overseas clients to buy in London, and I'm here to learn from Adam because last time and when I met him, I learned a lot. So I want just to learn how to grow my portfolio in the right way in a business structure without doing big mistakes. And hopefully and I'm a big fan of Adam also. And hopefully we learn a lot from that. Thank you very much, Sam, for organizing this.
No, good. So Adam, the fan club is growing, you know.
That's two hot people. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, I think Antonello, I'll just allow you to talk. Okay, Antonello. Yeah, Antonello, yes. I think I worked out how to get you on as a panelist. Yes. Yeah.
Got
Okay.
fever, so I'm feeling so hot. I got 3 days, so I'm in quarantine. I'm just going crazy.
Oh, really? For real? Okay.
Yes, for real. But it's not. I guess it's just a fever. You know, I got to deal with it. So yes, I'm relatively new in the property business, and I've started my service accommodation, and I also help landlords to maximize the return for their properties. And I just wanted to be here because for me, anything that allows me to learn something more is welcome.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's good. So let me see if I can demote you back and then get someone else.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the chat, and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Antonello, nice to see you.
Who else?
You really have got all the power tonight, Sam, haven't you?
Yeah, wow, exactly. I can get used to this power, you know. Okay, I think I've got Mel. Yeah, let me see if I can get Mel on as a panelist. Yeah, okay.
Hey, I can hear. Can you
Oh
hear
yeah.
me?
Okay, you're on now, yeah.
Excellent.
Okay,
So,
just 1 second. Let me promote you. Do you want to be on? Okay. Yep. Mel.
no video, no video.
Oh, no video. Okay,
just
okay.
audio.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Okay, go on.
Right. So, good evening, everyone. I am Mel. I'm Mel Wood, and what I do, I'm an expert at property and business solutions, and so essentially this can range from security systems to energy supply or telecommunications to loans, etc., etc. So if you want to find out more, you're able to get in touch with me separately from this meeting, and we can discuss solutions or issues that you might be having, and you want some ideas. So that's it.
Okay, great.
Hi, Mel.
Great. Okay, well, that's a very short and sweet. Okay, I think there are a few people that got their hands up again. Who else? Okay, I've got James. Is that James Cover? Just hold on 1 second. James, yes, you have the. Let me promote you to the panel.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Excellent.
Okay, James. Yeah. Go on, James.
Well, thanks for having me, Sam. I mean, I've been planning to come to one of your property seminars for probably half a decade.
Exactly. And today, thanks to CV-19.
There you go. So yeah. COVID-19 really, it's directly linked to that, because I wouldn't have been able to make it into your face-to-face event. So really, I mean, I'm a property investor. I'm a wealth manager professionally, and with all the changes to taxation, I kind of slowed down my property portfolio growth. And I've kind of gone in circles around what to do there. And I think it's time to start kind of looking in more detail at whether there's some traction to be had in property again. So I've gone and had a look at Adam. Hi, Adam. So saw some really good things there, read up on some really impressive background, and I'm here to learn as much as I can. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, James.
Thanks, James. Good to see you.
funny enough, you and Adam probably have a lot in common in terms of background of, growth in terms of wealth management. Because Adam has done a bit of that as well in the past. I think he will probably share that with you once he starts at 7. But let me just go through a few more people before we Adam starts. Okay, I think I've got a few more hands up. I've got Fathia. Let me allow Fathia to talk. Yeah. Okay, Fathia. Hello. Hello. Okay, I think Fathia for some reason is not coming on with the speaker. Okay, let me just look through other. Okay. Oh, maybe I didn't allow her to talk. Okay. Hi, Fathia. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, she's not coming on. Let me see. Hello. Hi, Agnes. Okay, I saw your hand up again. I thought maybe you wanted to talk again. Okay. Okay. Adam.
Yes, sir.
I think we'll probably get into 7 o'clock soon. So what I'm going to do, I had a pre-presentation to do just for a few minutes before you start.
Okay.
Think because Artie had to do that, but I think she hasn't joined yet. I might let you go through and then talk, and then I'll do that just before the Q&A.
Sure, no problem.
But let me just see. There's still a few hands up that wanted to talk. But I can't get everyone to. Okay. Okay. So okay, that's good. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I think I can't see anyone else that wants to talk. Okay, I'm going to just quickly introduce Adam. Of course, most of you, from looking from the list of participants, quite a few of you attended the last Midas event where Adam presented. Adam, again, like I said in my introduction and the invite, there's so many people out there that will tell you how you can buy property, you can do delayed completion, how you can do all sorts of deals. But there are very few people that will tell you how you can manage those properties, especially once you get to 10 and beyond. What do you do after you get 10 properties? What exactly do you do to get that going? So I think that's where the audience that attended the last event, we had about maybe 90 to 100 people in the room. Everyone wanted Adam to come back today and present about how he actually runs his business. So Adam, without much further ado, I'll let you kick off, and then I will do my presentation just before the Q&A.
That's brilliant, Sam. Thank you. And are you going to share the slides, Sam, or shall I try and share them from here? What's the best way?
Share from there. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
That's how you can control it. Yeah.
Give me a second, and that should. Let's see if this works. Hopefully, everybody can see that. Okay, is that okay, Sam?
Oh yes, yeah, I can see it. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so we had a chat about what we wanted to do tonight, and there's an element of this in which I'll talk about scaling the business, as we said, but we also thought it would be a pretty good idea tonight to go through a strategic framework really that I created, and I've created my own portfolio in this image. So the whole point really, and the point of this big long list of qualifications here is not for me trying to show off, but more me sort of trying to show you what my background is, where I've come from, and the approach I've taken towards building it all. So as Sam said, management of not only the tenancies, not only the properties, but the asset management piece as a whole, I think is sometimes overlooked a little bit in residential property, or people don't take it too seriously. I've gone out and passed my residential lettings and property management level 3. I'm qualified agent in Wales. I'm also a qualified agent in Scotland. That's not what I do on a day-to-day basis, but I do run a back-end company that does look after all of that, and I do oversee that company. So that's how seriously I've taken the management side of things. Mentioned I've got a couple of master's degrees in there, so you'll just see sort of where I come from. I'm definitely interested in academic history, particularly economic history, and at the moment, this is why I'm finding this time really that we're in now is frying my brain. But it's really incredible to live through. You know, we've just lived through a Brexit, or the start of a Brexit, which has been relatively historical. This is, again, unprecedented stuff, unprecedented times. So really interesting trying to work through it. And what you'll see throughout some of this, I think, is not only how I've sort of built and scaled my business, but also how hopefully it's a bit of a cockroach style approach, in that it's kind of mostly built to withstand a bit of a nuclear war. Although I think I'll struggle if everybody stops paying their rent at the same time, but we'll get onto that later on. So I'll just move on to the second slide. So there's a little agenda there. I'm going to go through relatively quickly into the meat of the presentation, because I think that's what we're all here for. And then we'll get through right to the end. And as Sam said, we'll do a brief Q&A as well after he's done his presentation. So there's a little bit about me there. Slightly anomalous career path. I know quite a few who've logged on have already said they know me, so I won't spend lots and lots of time on this slide, but that top point there refers to the fact that I lived in Geneva, Switzerland for a couple of years, where I worked in wealth management. I was born in a small town suburb of Birmingham called Shirley, and I'm back to living there at the moment, actually. So a little bit of an interesting journey. I certainly came as a youngster from a relatively mathematical angle. I was quite good at maths, and it really has a significant impact on my life in kind of everything that I've done, because I spent some time, I earned my way through university by winning money playing fruit machines, which is something not many people know about me. And then went on to I was always interested in gambling and turning the numbers to my advantage. And that's how I got involved in what's called sports arbitrage. So that was effectively placing bets on sporting events, of which, interestingly enough, while COVID-19 is going on, there are pretty much no sporting events at the moment. So I'm glad I'm not still doing that, because I'd be out of work right now. And then that turned into what might seem a strange journey, but what might seem to some to not be a materially massively different thing. And when I went to Geneva, I worked in wealth management. I worked for a couple of boutique companies, building portfolios for high net worth individuals. That taught me an awful lot about diversification, which has been a handy thing to have at this time. And it taught me an awful lot about how the rich get rich and how they stay rich, realistically. And then we're going to go on to talk about the portfolio. So there's just a very, very brief slide there with some of the assumptions I make about the audiences that I'm presenting to. So hopefully those always make sense to people. And as I say in that last point there as well, really happy to answer any questions. If you think I've got something wrong, if you think there's something that needs further clarification or discussion, let's get into it in the Q&A. I love the feedback bit. So the point of this presentation is really my journey through property has shown me, I think, that there are four really, really key parts to starting a portfolio, as some mentioned there in the open networking about starting from rent to rent and then developing into asset purchasing, and then growing it. And then effectively also, of course, we're at a time now where we need it to survive. And this is the stress test moment, you know, so hopefully this will unpick a lot of that for you. So it's really interesting if you talk to people who've been in the game for a long time. A lot of them will tell you different things. Some of that is to do with where they're geographically located. Some of it is to do with where their skills are. So, for example, I've got a long-standing joint venture partner of mine who always says, look, there's only two things you need in this game. You need the deals and you need the money. And I looked at that and I thought, you know what? I'm not sure that's everything. But I know what that means for him is that's where he's found scarcity at different points in time. Sometimes it's very difficult to get deals. sometimes it's very difficult to get money, and I'll talk a bit about how I've sort of handled both of those things. But the whole point of the 4 slides that I'm going to show you about the 4 pillars here are, on the left-hand side, are really routes that should really be accessible to anybody, especially if they've got the confidence to go about them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the skill set in order to leverage those as well. So we've got there on the left-hand side of the supply pipeline really is where you get your deals from. So like many people, I started with estate agents because that made most sense. They've got the most stock. They're the gatekeepers of all these wonderful deals that we suppose in our minds that everybody else is probably doing while we're struggling to get one. And I still think to this day, there's nothing wrong with dealing with estate agents. We still do buy some stock to this day on the open market. It's not a big slice of our stock, but quite often something will come across our desk that started its life in an estate agent's window. And sometimes it's been bounced around 1, 2, 3 estate agents, auction companies, BMV traders, stuff like that. But the point is really, it was once in an agency window. And so at some point it became a deal. And had someone else had the presence of mind to snap it up at that point, they would have been able to do that deal instead of me doing it. So I like to, I use the tactic, and I talked about it a bit last month, so I won't dwell on it, of pounding the ground, seeing the agents, doing lots and lots and lots of viewing stuff online, viewing stuff in person, putting bids in, trying to build relationships with agents, and ended up doing some deals that way. And they were reasonable deals, and they've served me well because they were years ago. They were in the right sort of places, and they all made sense at the time, and they all make sense today. But then as I sort of went on, and I think that is a natural progression, people start to look at auctions. I presented last month really specifically about auctions, so I'm not going to dwell on that point, other than to say I think there still can be an awful lot of value there. I think people need to make sure they're trying to do something different at the auction. So we will all, certainly some of the people who've introduced themselves tonight, will want different things from an auction than I will want. And that's a good thing. That's what it takes. I like to target stock specifically that I think other people won't necessarily want. So it may well be, as we go through the whole coronavirus episode, there gets to be maybe some empty commercial units. I think that's a reasonable possibility. It might be a great time to be looking at picking up some commercial units or mixed use units at auction. Even in the best sort of markets, those are units that do not tend to sell that well at auction, especially as they tend to be occasionally placed in the wrong sort of auction. So London obviously has a lot more in terms of volume of auctions of different lots. Not everybody makes their selection of auction as well as they could, and I'm sure I won't give away too many secrets, Sam, because I don't want to steal your secret sauce or spill your secret sauce all over the place. But there are there are many properties sometimes that go into the wrong sort of auction, and they're just the sort of stock that you and I like to target. So it's a really good thing for people to look out for. And I also think, and I mentioned it last month, but it's worth repeating, stock that hasn't sold at an auction, I think we're going to see. I mean, we are right now, it's the 19th of March, isn't it? We're in the middle of a situation where next week we may well see some auctions that auctioneers have built the book. They don't necessarily have a venue for the auction, either by their own choice or by the venue's choice. And they're trying to cobble together an online auction. Some of them have never done it before. The truth, and I'm involved in online auctions myself, and the truth is the best online auction, which I would say that because I'm involved in it, but the best online auction that we believe there is also still backed up by people in the background doing the negotiator's job and matchmaking the buyers and the sellers and getting the right interested parties in front of the right sort of properties. And at this time, there hasn't been a lot of chance for all of that. So if you've been lucky enough to view some lots in some auctions that are taking place next week, you may have a giant advantage over the rest of the room or the rest of the virtual room, and that might be a really good advantage for you to press. I think there'll be some stuff next week that trades lower than it should, and I think there'll also be some stuff that if it doesn't sell, there might be some really motivated vendors as well. So you're going to have to make some decisions, but it might well be that next week we see some really good deals coming along. I would also just say for those listening, I've seen in the last 24 hours 2 deals that I would regard as absolutely exceptional, and on any other day I would have removed their arms at the elbow to take those deals. But today and yesterday I've been saying, well, do you know what, I think I can afford to leave that for the moment, or that needs to go lower, because I think we're going to see some deals available. And I actually think we've probably got a relatively short time window here. I don't think we're going to have a really prolonged and elongated property recession at all. I think what I've already seen over the last 48 hours is people assuming that the apocalypse has already happened, and that's just not reality at the moment. I think there's potential for the market to wobble and go down a bit, yeah, absolutely. But I also think we're going to have a fairly swift descent like we've had in the stock market, and I think we'll also have a relatively swift recovery, especially as the Bank of England, particularly in the government, seem to be willing to do whatever it takes to shore up what's going on in the equity markets and in the whole of the country, really. And then I'll just mention sources there as well, because sources are available to all of us. I would say I've been through quite a few of them. Most of those relationships have not worked out very well, even from the beginning. It's a low success rate game, but the ones that do work out well, the ones I've found synergy with are, of course, people who don't want to hold any property. They're just pure property traders, BMV traders, and they just get stock in and they sell it as quickly for the highest price that they possibly can. And I've been able to build some relationships on the back of that, because I've wanted to hold stock and then refinance it and hold it for the long run. So that has worked out well for me. But sources can, the danger, of course, the biggest danger you have to highlight is almost anyone can start up as a sourcer, and it's very difficult. There's no register to look at. There's no, there are some these days, of course, bigger franchises that source deals. I think you can get some good people in those networks. Again, franchisees are generally people who have paid a sum of money to own a franchise. That isn't necessarily the best way of qualifying them as a great property sourcer, but you know that they have received some training. They are at least doing it compliantly. But as with any franchise, I would say they will only be as good as the person who's bought the franchise. So there may be some brilliant people who work for some of the franchise companies, and there may be some not so good people, but it's not the worst place in the world to start if you're looking for sources to work with. The only other thing I'd say is you really do have to take full responsibility for the deals that you do. So don't let someone who's a good sales agent ultimately sell you something that you don't want. You've got to buy what you want to buy. And then over on the right hand side there, these are the more sophisticated strategies. So direct to vendor, again, I spoke a little bit about last month. I would say my experience of it has been it's a very, very, very competitive game. It is a way to get deals. There are definitely still offline methods that work, but they work in very, very small numbers these days, I think. So you may have to deliver an awful lot of leaflets, do a lot of offline advertising, door knocking strategies, going around physically looking for deals, in order probably these days to only do 1, 2, 3, 4 deals a year. If you were lucky, you probably have to devote most of your time to doing that. If you want to play the online game, if you know a lot more than I do about online marketing, SEO, lead generation, stuff like that, it can work. I do know some companies that spend literally hundreds of thousands of pounds a month on their marketing budgets, which tells you that they're making lots of money doing it, but it also tells you they're big machines. So if you're going to go out and compete with these big machines, you either need exceptional knowledge of lead gen or Google AdWords or pay-per-click or stuff like that, or you need gigantically deep pockets and people who've done it before, ideally for who really know what they're doing. Joint ventures, I think that can be a great way to get deals in as well. So it might be JVing with people who've worked in estate agency. It might be JVing with people who've worked in BMV trading pipelines. It might just be JVing with traders, because they may be having to bring the stock to you and for you to organise the funding and the rest of the portfolio. Sometimes the best traders, you find they've got they're relatively short attention spans, and they're not interested particularly in tenants. So all the best partnerships, you have people who are weak in certain areas and strong in certain areas. and that's what I found with people that I've JV'd with and had the most success with. And then direct from receivers, I think that can be sometimes seen as a bit of a holy grail kind of solution. I've seen very little of it pulled off effectively, but I do know a couple of people. I've unfortunately never done it myself, but I do know a couple of people who have managed to do what you would call a pre-pack deal. So before the receivers are actually called in, before the portfolio has been repossessed, they're being leaned on by the bank, and the bank is effectively not forcing the sale quite yet, but they're very strongly encouraging the sale. And those sort of portfolios, sometimes for different reasons, such as anonymity, can trade at the sort of price that would get you very interested, the sort of 25+% discount level. And then portfolios themselves. So we're currently still negotiating on a portfolio of 82 units, myself and a JV partner. That's by far the biggest I've ever bought. I've bought quite a few 6s and 8s and things like that. I tend to find there's a bit of a sweet spot in that size. 6 is a good number because you can access multiple dwellings relief if that's going to save you some stamp duty. And you often find landlords who've built up 6, 8, 10, they haven't necessarily done it in the most professional or elegant way, and therefore they quite often have built it over time. It's paid them good rents, it's given them good capital growth, and just sometimes when they're motivated enough, they will sell them at a workable discount. Now that is a very condensed version. Portfolio landlords are probably the toughest of all to negotiate with, of all vendors, because although they're usually reasonably financially motivated, they're not really motivated enough, generally speaking, to do great deals. So I would say very low success rate, generally speaking, can take a long time. So you have to really push your relationship building skills, but it can be a great way to get deals in. And of course, as you grow, if you have ambitions of building a big portfolio, once you get to a certain number, buying 1 or 2 at a time is not really going to be the way forward anymore. You're going to have to look more towards the big portfolios to grow quickly enough and for it to be meaningful enough, really, for you to go to all the trouble. So I'll move on to my second pillar, and that's about the financial structure. And that's obviously extremely topical at the moment, because really this is about where do you get the money from, and how do you really think about your money, and how do you structure your financials behind your business. So you've got, first of all, I've called My Money Now, as simple as what you've got available to yourself today. So in the intros, we had a few people say, they're sitting on some cash right now. It's the easiest way to access it. The only thing I'd say about that is sometimes I consider equity preservation as, at any time, as an extremely important part of my strategy. At this time where we find ourselves right now, I'd say equity preservation is right at number 1, because the difficult thing right now is thinking about what opportunities there may be. As I said, my belief is still it's going to be a relatively short window here to do some really, really good purchasing. But if I bought why did I not buy those 2 great deals I talked about on the last slide? Because my gut is telling me there's going to be even better stuff that comes along in the next couple of months, and I can afford to keep my powder dry and wait and do some exceptional deals rather than just some really good ones. And that's just my gut feel. But I like equity preservation as a strategy. So the bank's money, that's another obvious one, but it doesn't just mean long-term debt in terms of mortgages. It could be personal loans, which are maybe not a bad time to consider getting personal loans and being more liquid, because I think liquidity will be super helpful while we go through the situation we're in at the moment. And then I've left over there on the left-hand side as well the vendor's assets, because I think those are deals that you can do. I think those are deals that are accessible to anyone if you can build a good relationship with the vendor. So what I mean by that is effectively rent-to-rent, lease options, things like that. So they are available even to those who are relatively new into the sector. Effectively, you are leveraging the vendor's assets and hopefully renting something from them at below the market rental value, and then renting it out and sweating the asset over and above the market rental value with whatever strategy you're layering on top of the rent-to-rent contract. And then over on the more sophisticated side, my money tomorrow. So I use a strategy of looking where refinancing is going to drop back into my pipeline. I use, and I know there will be, I actually took this from when I did some consultancy work at one of the top 10 UK lenders. They explained to me their building society, and they explained to me how their financial pipeline works. And really it was not incredibly sophisticated, in that if you think about a building society traditional model, they get money in from savers and they lend it out to people for houses, they lend it out for mortgages. They know, because they have experience, how long and how much money they will bring in if they put out things at certain rates on instant access accounts, 1 year bonds, 2 year bonds, 5 year bonds, stuff like that. And they know roughly how much money they will get out the door if they put a mortgage product out there, and how they do their pricing. So I looked at that sort of model and said, right, if I can look at my pipeline of when money's going to drop in, and that could be through rents that are coming in every month, we hope, during this coronavirus crisis. But that could be through rents that are coming in every month. It could be coming in through refinancing that's coming up. It could be coming through refinancing on purchases. It could be coming from other sources like developments, if you're into development deals, land promotion, things like that. So it's managing the future money and sometimes using short-term bridges to bring some of that future money into the present, and then investing it now, if that makes sense. Other people's money, it's talked about sometimes, I think, quite disrespectfully by some people who present on the circuit. I think my attitude is I use it more carefully than I use my own, but my attitude is also that it's a powerful weapon to use, and if I can get returns on an average year of 20-25% plus, and sometimes a lot more, then that gives me quite a lot of headroom to borrow other people's money at a really competitive rate in a secure way, and invest it and then pay them back good dividends over time. So I see it as something that I have it's a win-win situation for me. I can really add value doing that, and that's why I do it. The bridges money, I've done a lot. I'm very open and honest that I've done a lot of what I've done because I've had support of some decent sized bridging companies. I think it's interesting to see, and it will be interesting to see where they're at the moment, because obviously only earlier today we saw the Bank of England base rate cut again to 0.1%, so a new historic low. And the bridges, I'm sure, will be having a bit of a twitchy time, because ultimately the big boys have hundreds and hundreds of staff. Their business is lending money. Do they want to lend money at the moment to covenants that they're not sure are brilliant? They probably don't. Are they concerned that prices might drop a bit? They're definitely going to be concerned. And ultimately, even like the rest of us and the best of us, they don't truly know what's going to go on tomorrow at the moment, because this situation's unfolding day by day. And I think from all the people that I've canvassed, I mentioned in the intros about canvassing some of the biggest and best and brightest that I've come across over all the years I've been involved in investment businesses and property. One thing we all agreed on today is we don't really know where it's going, but we do know it's happening and unfolding very, very quickly, much faster than things unfolded in 2008. So the bridges will be feeling twitchy at the moment. And having said that, if they go, this is a sort of business, if they go 4 weeks, 6 weeks without doing much in terms of volume, they're going to need to get money out the door, and they're going to find that the long-term rates are so low. We might see bridging rates go down. We might see them go up. We might just see less credit available. A lot of that depends on how the bridges are capitalized. And I could probably do a whole presentation on how bridges capitalize themselves. So we'll leave that for the Q&A if anyone's interested. And then the vendor's money. So that's different from the vendor's assets, in as much as that's really referring to vendor finance deals. So in a situation where a vendor's got an asset, sometimes an asset-backed business, it might be possible and it might be suitable for the vendor to sell you the business, including the property, and then the vendor to be the mortgagor on that. So effectively the vendor is providing you a loan. So the business transaction is done. They may want guarantees off you. They are probably going to want some money up front, of course, but it might enable you to buy a 500 grand business for 50 grand and the vendor to provide the other 450. They're going to be better than a bank. They're going to be more flexible. And if they want out and they ultimately buy into you, that's a great deal that can be done without putting lots of money into it. And I've got colleagues who've done a few of those. I've done a couple of them myself. They're complex. They take time. They're sophisticated, but they can be, the rates of return on them can be exceptional. So then onto the third pillar. This is about refurbishment. And really, I like to call it more than that. Really, it's more like optimization, because there's more than just refurbishment that goes on with property. So on the left-hand side there, you've got that first little acronym, which stands for do it your freaking self. I did that certainly when I started out. I did a 1-week intensive plastering course. It was particularly useful to me, not just because it taught me that I should never be a plasterer, but it taught me how to manage a project. It taught me about contractors' behaviour. It taught me also, more than anything, not to overdo it. I badly overplastered that property, wasted a lot of time and money on it, probably spent 3 or 4 grand more than I needed to, and let it so quickly because it was so over-specced. I probably could have let it for even more money than I did. But it taught me a lot about refurbing, and I wouldn't put anyone off doing that, even if it's just to really learn the project management bit on the ground. Small contractors, that's a stage that I still use a lot of the time these days, because I very specifically stick to houses that tend to be valued at somewhere between 75 and 125 grand. And that doesn't leave lots and lots of room, even though I have the ability these days and the contacts to do some pretty good deals. There isn't really money in there to pay for the best contractors in the country to come around and do them. There isn't really money to pay for flashy contractors who are levying VAT and are making a chunky margin. So small contractors is a powerful weapon in my arsenal that I still use to this day, even with hundreds of properties under my belt. And then a project manager, and I put that in there because, again, it's accessible to anybody. I would highly recommend working with a project manager, especially if you're working on a project which has got 100 grand or more's worth of building works. Even if you have the sort of skills that are required, the real detail focus, and you understand the building side of it, and also the efficiency, the Gantt chart, the administrative side of it as well. Seeing a project manager do it once can teach you an awful lot of lessons you can take away, and you can then decide whether it's something you'd like to do again, or whether you would be better outsourcing that to somebody else. I think it's probably also worth saying you can quite often find, and I think you'd find quite a few of them at the moment, a freelance project manager who's worked for a big house builder or a medium-sized house builder and now works on a contract basis. You might find someone like that who could do 1 or 2 days a week managing a project for you, and you could learn an awful lot from them, I'm sure. Then on the right-hand side, I put in JV partners again there, and that's primarily because I think a lot of the traditional JV really is, the builder and the investor. That can work out really well. It can also work out really badly. I've seen lots of both happen. Sometimes it's a match made in heaven, because all good teams, as I said earlier on, have people who are weak in certain areas supported by people who are strong in certain areas. But I have found that can also backfire, because you can sometimes get people who the builder thinks they're doing all the wet work and all the hard bits. The investor thinks they're doing the hard bit because they've got all the money, they've taken all the risk, they've had to do all the mortgage, but to put the personal guarantees up and all the rest of it. So it's like any JV. I think the key behind that is just making sure that you're on the same page. You've got your expectations set out in the beginning. And I think JV partners, I stick on the right hand side because I do think it's a sophisticated thing. You will always see people who are willing to joint venture with people very, very quickly that they don't know that well. That does scare me. I think that should scare you. If you're thinking about doing it, I'd think twice. I try to not joint venture with people unless I've known them quite literally for years, or we've had a very close relationship in a compressed period of time and spent a lot of time together and getting to know each other, and we know what our expectations are. Paperwork I put in there because that's my absolute favourite way to refurb any property. Not that easy with resi, a lot easier with commercial style stuff, but it can be done with resi. Some of the best deals that I've done have included paperwork exercises, usually legal problems. So it might be boundary disputes, it might be proceeds of crime, restrictions on the title, unilateral notices on the title, all these sorts of things. And there are many, many notices and restrictions at the land reg, so many that I certainly don't know what they all are. And I still see about 2 or 3 new ones that I never knew about every year. And they can be really profitable because that sort of stuff scares people off, particularly in auction packs. It'll really scare them off. And if you want to put the time and effort in to see what's actually going on and speak, and you've got a solicitor on your team who really knows what they're doing, they can be really, really valuable things, even on quite expensive properties. So one of my favourites, but it is a more sophisticated strategy. And then over there, also, I think larger contractors has to live over there because you're entering into a newer world there where you are absolutely taking the position of the developer. You can get caught, especially by variations, but by a whole number of other things. I know that at the moment, certain larger contracts are going through an absolute nightmare scenario because if, as and when some of their sites shut down, they're trying to work out whose fault it will be in terms of the contract, and that's going to be a big, long legal wrangle. And then the last one there, commercial. So one of the beautiful things about commercial is if you get into commercial property, if you can match, let's keep it relatively simple. If you can match an empty unit, of which, as I've said, I think there might be a few more empty units coming over the next few months. If you can match an empty unit to a willing tenant, you can sometimes buy a property. If you buy an empty commercial property, you're buying it at its worst. If you can put a tenant in there, especially with a good covenant, then you're still going to find you can add a lot of value without doing too much. And I think you might want to consider, if you are, whilst it's maybe somewhat difficult to think of businesses that are going to benefit too much from this whole coronavirus situation, delivery-led food businesses are quite likely to have a bit of a boom. And I remember hearing someone else's presentation a couple of months ago who was saying the top 3 pizza delivery outfits in the UK, which I think are Domino's, Pizza Hut and Papa John's, were looking for 5,000 new outlets over the next 2 years. That's a huge amount of real estate. So I wouldn't think this time they're having a particularly bad time. I think you've got a lot of people stuck at home and you've got them not spending money out in pubs, clubs and restaurants. They might be very, very happy to spend on takeaway pizzas. So just a thought there for everybody. And then the last one, as Sam said, really probably certainly not my favourite bit of the job, but I am a total management obsessive because I think it's so important. And I think one of the reasons I think it's so important is ultimately all of that lovely stuff we've just talked about. Yes, it might take you a long time to do a deal, but you might go to an auction and do a deal in 45 minutes. The refurbishment can be somewhat painful, takes its time. But realistically, it's going to be done and dusted in 3-4 months on your average property, maybe 6 to 9 months on a bigger HMO conversion or something like that. And your financials really should be structured before you're going in to do any deals. So that takes up the first 3 to 9 months of the asset's lifespan. If you're in this game of holding on to property, you're really into it for at least 10 years, ideally, if not 20 or 30 or plus. And that means the rest of the lifespan of that asset is going to be all about the management and who manages it. So again, on the left-hand side there, accessible to all of us, I've said, do it your freaking self. Did you not learn the last time? That stands for. And that's kind of a very, very large number of us start off doing it that way, I think. And then we realise, I certainly realised when I got up to the sort of 40, 45 property level, I was spending far too much of my own time on management issues, and therefore I was spending less time doing deals, less time doing keeping my eye on the really, really important stuff in the business. So there was no 2 ways about it. I felt that I needed to go into lettings in order to get best practice from others, and in order to really just try and expand my network and also just leverage their expertise, and I could stick to doing what I was best at. And the agents, although I am an agent myself, the agents could really do the property management bit that they were best at. So then that moves on to the letting agent. I think I won't say too much on that other than I think it's a good idea to have an agent and a backup agent if and when you start to grow a portfolio. it's quite a good idea to have, even if you are geographically in one location, it's still quite a good idea to have 2 agents. And it's no bad thing if both agents know about each other, because you know it. I would never apologize in my business for using 2 or 3 people to do the same job, because it keeps them on their toes. And I just say to them quite openly, you know, I have not built my business on dependencies. I've certainly tried to avoid dependencies wherever I can. And I think anybody listening to this who wants to scale should do the same thing, because it costs you very little in terms of time and effort. But in a time when one agent might sell to a corporate, one agent might fold, one agent might do all sorts of other things. And you don't want that to be happening ultimately, because if that affects your whole portfolio rather than half of it or a third of it, then you're going to be better off in the latter situation, obviously. And then friends and family is on the left-hand side, because again, accessible to all of us. The only thing I'm going to say about that, because we're running out of time, is don't do it. I know lots of people have done it, tried to do it, and it's not to be recommended, in my opinion. I know very few people who it works really, really well for, so I'd just keep them out of it if I was you. And then over on that right-hand side, the portfolio manager. So the job there really being that's the person who certainly in theory can replace you and look after the whole shooting match. So I would look at them as someone who's capable of the asset management side as well. So they are going to ask the questions about whether we should be making it into an HMO or a social housing HMO or a local authority let or something else. They're going to be quite a capable individual, and obviously you need to be throwing off a reasonable amount in rent in order to afford to employ one of those individuals. And at the level above that, a business manager. So you may well pick up, as I have, trading businesses alongside of your portfolio that have synergies with it. That business manager will also be able to help run those businesses, oversee those businesses, and that's a very useful person to have. Sometimes call them second line of defence. I tend for mine to have some kind of equity shares somewhere along the line, so I make sure I'm choosing absolutely the right person, build the right incentive structure for them, and I want to keep them in for the long run, and I know we'll make money together in the long run. And then you've got to put the HMO specialist in there. I put that in there because I think it's not necessarily for the faint-hearted. HMOs can be great. Quite a lot of people you find might get to 2 or 3 or 5 HMOs and they're managing it themselves, and they're at absolute breaking point, and they work so hard. They work so many hours a week doing it, and I just think that's going to stop you. Ultimately, if it has to be you, then that's going to stop you from scaling. So I've never met that many HMO specialist managers who I really, really rate. I've met a handful of them. The difficulty I have with them, and this shouldn't apply in London if you do your due diligence properly, but the difficulty I have in other parts of the country is I want them and I want a backup, as I said before, on the letting agency side. And sometimes there's none around, and sometimes there's only one. So it's not ideal. And then ultimately the business owner side of it, which is, I think, really when you get to the point where your business can survive day to day without you in it. That is seen by some as the holy grail, but ultimately you'll almost always have to step back in as and when subordinates are on holiday, something goes wrong. You can sit at the top all you like, but you know only the hardest stuff comes across your desk. So as you can imagine, at the moment, I'm heavily involved in my trading businesses and my investment businesses, because everybody's looking around for that leadership, and you're never going to be able to delegate that while you actively own a business. But then ultimately, you're never going to be able to get the sort of rates of return that you can do in a property business from the stock market or from shares in real estate trusts or whatever. So I'll just briefly run through these takeaways because I'm coming up to my 45 minutes. I won't roll through all of them. I'll just let you read through them there. But I think I'll just highlight a couple that I think are really worthwhile at the moment. Number 5, don't follow the crowd, couldn't be more apt than at a time like this, because ultimately you can't do what everybody else is doing. What people have done right now is they've bought high and they've sold low. And anybody who's looking to release assets and release properties right now is almost certainly not someone you want to be following. I think number 4 is probably worth mentioning as well at the moment. I like to look back, and I like to try and give back by doing presentations like this. Hopefully there's some value in it for everyone, and I would point to, you know, there's been a very good handful of people who've helped me out along the way and who still do help me out, and people I've been able to pick up the phone to on weeks like this and get really, really valuable information from, and try to give them some value as well. And then be like Buffett, not Trump. That's not supposed to be political. That's supposed to say, ultimately, what has Warren Buffett done? And this is a really, really great time to be bringing out all those Warren Buffett epithets. You know, be greedy when others are fearful, etc., etc. What's Warren Buffett done? He's bought fundamentally good businesses that throw off cash, and he's bought them below their value, in his opinion. And then he sold them when he believes they're above their true value, or the market is caught up with him. Whereas Trump realistically has gambled on things, tried to create his own markets in places like Atlantic City, totally ignored things like recessions, borrowed money, been bankrupt numerous times, etc., etc. Warren Buffett, the way I look at the world, his whole journey could have played out in 100 million different ways, but 99.999 million of those ways show him being a very, very wealthy man indeed. Whereas Trump, I mean, anything could have happened. And granted, he happens to be the president of the US, but he could have been a bum on the street realistically as well. So that pretty much, folks, takes us into the Q&A. But I think, Sam, if you want to take control back, then you should be able to do your presentation or do the Q&A as you see fit.
Thank you, Adam. That was excellent. Okay, just before we go on, let me just quickly do this. Okay. Can you see it, Adam?
Yeah, can see that. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So hi everyone. Can you see that? Just let me know by saying yes on the chat.
Yes, we can see that.
Oh, you can. Okay, great. Yeah, I think I still have your mic on actually. Yeah, great. Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, that's good. Good. So that should have been at the beginning, but we went straight in because it wasn't ready. So I'm just gonna welcome you all. But by the way, thanks Adam. That was a great presentation. So I'm not gonna take too long for this, and also we can go straight to the Q&A. But before then, as you all know, we're having a very unprecedented time now in the UK and worldwide. So we've had to try new things. The last 2 nights, I've been in the office till like quite late, trying to learn how to do virtual events. So I'm glad this is going so far so good. Okay, again, our next events that we have planned, they will most likely all come online. So I thought we let everyone know that most of our events now will be online. I think the agenda on here is probably still assuming that we're going to be in a room. I'm not sure if we can actually do a virtual networking for a few hours, but I'm going to be here, see if people want to network for a bit. Then, and then what we do, I will send you a few details and a link if you want to know a lot more about Adam, and I strongly recommend that you listen to the broadcast that he did with Rod, and Rod, someone that hopefully we're going to get him in sometime soon to talk to us as well. But if you listen to that interview, it will be a fantastic update on to listen to. Then we've been recently offering quite a few workshops on auctions. We've got a few coming up. They've been in-house or in a hotel, but right now we have to move them online, and hopefully this technology would hold on and we can actually get them all done online on this technology. Richard, you were at the last event that we did. We spent quite a lot of time than I expected. There was so much discussion talking about the difference between a proxy bid and a telephone bid. Little did we know that within a few weeks, that will be the most important aspect of an auction. So a proxy or telephone bid will be very important next week to know the differences, which I can actually explain to you later, but that's for a different discussion. But for next week, you have to know the difference between a telephone bid and a proxy bid to be able to make money next week at the auctions. Okay, then yeah, so I'll email all the attendees the next upcoming couple of hours that we're going to do. While you have while you're at home, you might as well do some online seminars. Our next event coming up, the event on property question time will go virtual as well. We've got about 350 people so far booked on. So I think it's going to be a challenge trying to manage 350 people on the mic, but we are looking forward to got a fantastic panel, which you can see lined up. So we're working with them to try and get them all to acquainted with the technology from their own homes. So we look forward to all of you coming on board on next week, Wednesday, Thursday, but yeah, but I would probably that'll be on the 25th. Then moving on, we've got on the 2nd of April, the Ask the Property Entrepreneur event, which we do before the network auction network. That will come to online because that network auctions will go online as well. They can't really do social contact on that day, so it will be done online. We've had like discussions the last 2 days. I've been involved in a lot of conference calls with auction companies and EIG. EIG is so busy. They've suddenly got about 75 auction companies that want to do auctions online. So EIG office is probably the biggest, the most busy office after Downing Street here. So so just moving on, I'm just going to move quite quickly through so that we can go back to we're doing an auction review. Then we do have a couple of deals that we have for sale. Adam mentioned about portfolio. We have a portfolio from Up North, which is around about what Adam calls sweet spot, about 6 or 7 properties from Up North. I'll get those sent to you later. We actually have them listed at auction, so it's very easy to buy. So there's not much negotiation to be done, because one of the most difficult aspects of taking a property to the auction is that you do all the negotiation upfront. So you, as a buyer, you know what the reserve is. You just have to go above the reserve, and the vendor is quite a willing seller and it's quite motivated to sell. So I would send those to you later. Then I think without much further ado, I will take it back to hand over back to Adam, and we can do a Q&A. Has anyone got Adam?
Yeah, we've got one in the chat there, Sam, and we've got one in the Q&As there as well. So
okay,
if everybody can see the Q&A button there, I think I'll try and answer that one by Bright, if you like. So there's a few questions there about the financial structure, which I can rattle through, I think, relatively easily. What's the minimum deposit required if buying a second property? Well, that's changing quite fluidly at this time, because I'd normally say 20% or maybe 15% could work, but I know that 80% mortgage products are evaporating relatively aggressively at the moment. So I would say it's still probably 15 to 20, but I'd be budgeting 25 at the moment. Second question, how many times can one qualify for the 5-10% government scheme? I don't know if that's referring to Help to Buy there or something else, in which case that's not really within my expertise. You'll probably have to re-ask that if you're asking about something else, I think, because I'm not sure if that's what you mean. But if it is, then to my knowledge, only once, but I'm not sure. If I have a good credit record, can I borrow, let's say, 30k? There are personal loans tend to go up to about 25 grand. quite easily. As you go above 25, there are some lenders who will lend up to 50 or even 100. They tend to do it for different and varying reasons. Sometimes it's to pay a tax bill, so it's a relatively quick payback period. But it's certainly not impossible. There were, I believe, 30k personal loans looking to come out. What we're going to see over the next 3-4 months is anybody's guess, because we might see quite a lot of people trying to push credit out there because their margins are going to increase with a lower bank base rate. But those of us with good credit records may well be quite desirable covenants at the moment. And then can friends and family lend us money to purchase properties? How detailed are the bank's checks on the former? I don't know if by the former you mean in terms of just friends or friends and family, but realistically, a lot of this comes down to how experienced you are. I would always say the only way to approach these situations is to be open, transparent, and honest. I've borrowed deposits in the past, and then used bridging finance to buy properties, so both sides, all people involved in the transaction have known where I'm getting the money from, what the source of funds are, and all the rest of it. And I've never had a problem with that. If I was trying to do that today, would the bank be delighted with me having no skin in the game? Possibly not, as they might have seen that the risk profile's gone up recently, but it can be done. In terms of the bank's checks, what it will generally come down to is they will ask you the source of funds. So unless you're going to lie to the bank or the solicitor, then that's a self-certification. They'll probably also ask you for 3 or 6 months bank statements, so they would see the bank statement evidence of that as well. So that probably covers that one. I'll do cashes next because I saw that come in. Would you pause on the purchase transaction that's currently going through? So I'm assuming you mean in the big 82 unit portfolio that I referred to in the presentation there. Yeah, it's not something that you can imagine. Myself and my business partner, for me, it's the biggest deal I've ever done. For him, it's still a big deal to him. It's not the biggest he's ever done, but it's still worthy of consideration. And all options are on the table at the moment. They have to be, because if you asked me 48 hours ago, I'd have said, well, hang on a second, this portfolio has got tenants that are on the local housing allowance, and therefore probably some of the best covenants that you'll get at the moment, because the government they're paying the rent direct, Universal Credit or LHA, and the government is not going to see that as an issue over the next 6 months. The LHA has gone from really the bottom end, something you don't really want, to a really, really good covenant. So that was my position 48 hours ago. This morning, my position was, well, as I said to you guys in the presentation, equity preservation has become more and more and more and more and more important. Do we need to preserve the equity in order to see if we can do even better deals? So just so you guys know, and as I said, by far the biggest deal I've ever done, this is a portfolio that was managed at, that was valued a number of years ago at £5 million. It's had what we call a 90-day valuation on it, so it's had a relatively sharp valuation on it of £4 million. We've agreed a deal at £2.5 million to buy it. It throws off around, it's just under 30k a month in rents. As I say, they're generally LHA, so underwritten by the government. So the yield's very strong, so 14 odd percent, I think it is. So there's a lot to like about it, but ultimately, if we bridge the funds to buy it and we borrow the deposit, which is what our plan was, it doesn't really cash flow much for us in the here and now. It ties up a lot of borrowed money we could use to do something else with. It increases, we're putting a big personal guarantee out there at a time when we don't necessarily feel it might be the wisest time to do that. And as I say, so it's a really good question, Cash, because I'm absolutely thinking about it. And that really brings me on to the second bit of your question there around you going through a direct-to-landlord HMO deal, all tenanted. So I'm guessing you probably thought you were buying a nice cash-flowing purchase, which makes sense. Especially if you're an armchair investor, it definitely makes sense. But at this time, I would be looking at the profile of the tenants. I would be thinking about what I might do if the tenants' jobs are at risk, And at this time, I'm using a slightly different risk metric in my business. As I said earlier on, I'm looking at what the uplift is on the rent over and above the local housing allowance, not because I want to fill it with benefits tenants, but because I want to know just how much of a premium there is there above the LHA if those tenants are prevented from doing their jobs by the current situation. And look, it's probably going to be, as I say, a relatively short-term thing, relatively, especially as property tends to move comparatively slowly anyway. But will you be able to get an equally good deal? Look, if it's a fantastic deal, and if it's the best deal you've ever seen, if it's the, as I'm referring to my own deal, it's the biggest deal I've ever seen. Is it the best I've ever seen? No, it's not. And therefore I'm thinking, well, do you know what? Maybe I can keep my powder dry. Maybe we, as I say, we're not determined yet on exactly what we're going to do. So I'm just trying to give you as much of my thinking as I can, really. So I don't think you can go too far wrong, whichever way you go necessarily. But if you're gonna, what I wouldn't do at the moment is absolutely overstretch yourself and be cash poor, because I think that's the worst thing you could do at this time. So hopefully that helps. I see there.
Adam,
yes,
just so while we move to the next question, just picking up on you mentioned the portfolio that you're buying. It's LHA, which triggered something I had in my mind to ask you about. What are your thoughts about diversification? If someone is scaling to 10, 20, 30 properties, should they be all HMOs? Should they go through all assets in terms of tenancy types, commercials? What are your thoughts about diversification within a portfolio or within the property industry and out of the property industry?
Yeah, brilliant question, Sam, and so pertinent at the moment as well. So I think if you're looking at property assets that get over the £1 million mark in total, or over 10 units, you really want to be looking at diversification quite strongly. And I think, to answer your question, really, there's two parts to that. Definitely diversification within property is a good thing. So my target for my portfolio for the last sort of 18 months, my stated target has been around 70% core business single lets, working families. Ideally, they'd be 3-bedroom semis, but that's not always the case. But they've got blue collar jobs or lower white collar jobs, realistically, quite stable, not moving around lots and lots, so pretty stable tenancies. 20% on social housing style lets, so they will be dealing with a registered provider, an RP or a supported living provider who might be acting as the intermediary with a housing association. So they would provide guaranteed rent, but of course at this time that rent really is quite well guaranteed because, as I say, it's underpinned by the LHA rates normally. And then around 10% would come from really high yielding stuff. So for me, that tends to be short lease flats. I quite like them because they're quite difficult to price and therefore people tend to make mistakes around them. So I'm talking about flats that will yield you 12+% per year. Some of that 10% in my portfolio is also made up by mixed use commercial and shops with shop and tops, basically, because again, I'm squeezing yields of 12 to 15% out of them, and I'm talking about gross yield. So with leverage, we're doing really well, but I don't expect significant or any particular capital growth from those units. So that's my diversification within property. Diversification outside of property, I think it's a really good idea to have a strong balance of net worth. I mean, I'm actively involved in property, and in my trading businesses these days, apart from one, are all involved in property. So I have to be looking at getting a very high rate of return every year on them, which gives me a fair rate of return on my time and effort, realistically. I always say to people, if you're looking at armchair returns, you shouldn't really be sitting expecting more than 5 to 7% per year. And I still stand by that. And in fact, the measures that are being put into place right now are probably ensuring that 5% over the next decade or so is going to be per year is going to be a good rate of return, a really good rate of return. The stock market has, before a couple of weeks ago, done very well over the last 10, 12 years, since the last recession, since the great financial crisis. and it's provided returns probably on average of about 12% a year, which is far above and beyond what it should have been. A really, really good, well-diversified portfolio. I think if you want something, if you've got a decent amount of cash and what we would any of us would call real wealth, I think holding some of it in something like in cash or cash equivalents, maybe a quarter of it in gold. You can play with other commodities, but gold tends to be the one that people tend to gravitate to. A quarter of it in property, and a quarter of it in high yielding stocks is a pretty good way to do it as a real generalism. I mean, I know you said someone else is involved in wealth management here, so that's wealth management 101 for you there, probably. Bit simplistic, but it's not a bad proxy for why diversification is so important. And at this time, Sam, you can see why it's probably more important than it's ever been, because if you were holding a portfolio, the cash would be super handy to sweep up cheap stuff at the moment. The stocks would have delivered good returns for the last decade, but have taken an absolute hammering this year. Gold will have done reasonably well, and your property, hopefully, with tenants still paying rent, your property assets will still be delivering as well. But hard assets at this time, like property, are at a premium. They're much, much stronger and much, much less volatile than equities.
Okay, great stuff. There's a very good question here from Roy. Roy says, what is the best business structure for family property portfolio worth £3 million with equity, 1.5 million, proposed using circa 30% liquidity to buy more new properties to let, buy to let. Can you see that question, right?
I can, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah,
sure
that's a very good one, actually, yes.
Okay, let me have a go at that one then, Sam. So it might be worth, Roy, you speaking to an accountant or a tax strategist to discuss the family investment company, because without getting deep into the details of your personal family structure and who's involved and what age they are and all the rest of it, it may be appropriate for you to examine what they call a family investment company, which is just one particular structure that involves certain classes of shares that enable you to pass the equity growth on to those who are younger in the family, not creating a bigger and bigger inheritance tax liability. You said they're using 30% liquidity. I don't know if you're then talking about 30% of the 3 million portfolio that you're holding in cash, as well as on top of the 1.5 million equity you've got, or whether you're talking about recapitalising to achieve that. But the family investment company would be where I would start with that. But I certainly think you hopefully are already incorporated at this time. If you're not, it sounds like, without knowing any more details, you may well pass the tests for incorporation. And I would again get a really good tax planner to look at Section 162 incorporation relief. That's definitely worth you spending some time looking at, without a doubt. But to get all that into context, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial advisor, so you do need to get proper professional advice on that one. But that's the best I can do.
Okay, Adam, are you recommending a family office? Is it?
So I worked in a family office when I was in Geneva for a time, yes, but it wasn't property. It was heavily equity dependent. So I would, and what I have myself is hopefully the start of what I want to be my family office. But there is a structure called a family investment company. It's not, and that's not a specific incorporated vehicle. That's just the accountancy. It's the tax strategist's pet name for it, Sam. So they call it an FIC, family investment company. It's worth looking at. I'll just put that in the chat there so that people have.
Okay, I think I've got Sue Maxwell here with the hands up. Let me get her to probably see if I can get her as a panelist to ask her question. Sue, do you want to come on so I can ask yourself? I'm trying to work this out, make it more interesting by getting people to pop up by themselves and ask. Hello, hi Sue, can you hear us? So, hello. Okay, so maybe that hasn't worked well. I was trying to get people to pop up and ask the question, but
here she is.
Hi, Sue, can you hear us? Yes.
Yes, I can hear you, but you couldn't hear me. Hello.
Okay.
How are you, Sue?
I'm all right, thank you very much.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Well here.
Good.
in my hermitdom, I'm being a hermit.
Okay. You can switch on the camera if you want, yes, and then go
No,
on, get on.
It doesn't work on this Mac, so.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Because I've actually enabled you to for video. Okay, so
It's me.
okay, fire on your question, Sue.
Well, the only question I had really, Adam, was I overheard one of the things that you said at PIP one day about drawing down funds up to 50 or 100 or 150,000. And I missed what it was for, and it sounded fascinating. It was obviously some way of sort of giving up your job and building your portfolio year or something. Do you remember saying it, Adam?
I wish I did. So I'd have to really rack my brains about the context of that one. But I do sometimes refer to borrowing back against equity that I've created in the portfolio.
That sounds like it.
That could be it. So what I'm referring to is kind of securitization of an income stream, effectively. So if we took a theoretical position where you've got £1 million portfolio,
sure.
you've got £700,000 worth of debt, you leverage to 70% LTV.
Yep.
So therefore you've got £300,000 worth of notional equity on paper.
Yep.
Let's say that portfolio, after everything, nets you an extra, let's say 40 grand a year after all costs are paid and everything else, including tax and everything else. Then there may well be room for you to borrow up to, well, even up to 300,000, but obviously that would be extremely risky. But
sure.
Up to say £150,000 worth of that debt from a private lender, on the basis that you securitize maybe £20,000 a year of that income stream to pay them back. And so I've used that over time, if that makes sense, to kind of be able to gear up. So I haven't necessarily borrowed deposits directly, but I have borrowed back against equity that I've created. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that fits in also with the context that I overheard it.
Okay.
You were answering a question at your table and I was passing by. Okay. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. So you're creating more income at a cost, but it creates the extra, not necessarily income, but extra funds that you
capital that you can then deploy. Yeah, absolutely. And because I've been upfront with the lenders about that, and because I've explained to them how I've therefore that income, as I say, when I say securitized, what I mean is I've deliberately set that income aside to pay that loan back over the time period, and that has been well received by commercial bankers and underwriters alike, really, for that reason.
And it's very, you say it's almost bringing forward your future earnings, isn't it?
That's it, absolutely. So if you're looking at whether it depends on how you're growing your portfolio. If it's just operating on a sort of snowball kind of level, obviously at that point, then if you sacrifice 20k a year, you've only got 20k going into the snowball.
Yeah.
But of course, your new 150 grand is going to go and buy you, hopefully 600 plus grand's worth of assets if you're using leverage. That's going to then throw off more income, and it replaces what you're paying, and it's a self-fulfilling. It kind of just speeds up the snowball, if you know what I mean.
I think this is fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the question, Sue. Great question.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, Adam. Okay, let's look on the list of questions here before I bring in Brendan. I think we've got Brendan Quinn, a few people that have raised their hands. Just see if there's any questions on the while I bring Brendan.
Nothing. Well, I'm happy to answer Tunde's because that one looks like it just came in first. So Tunde says, me and my business partner bought 3 units last year. How do you recommend people scale up? What was the tipping point for you in terms of number of purchases per year? So that's a great question, Tunde. And I think, I wouldn't get obsessed with the number of units. I think the quantum, the actual amount in terms of monetary terms is probably the thing to look at. But I very deliberately chose to do cheap units, and therefore there was absolutely no choice for me but to do them at scale. Otherwise, the numbers just wouldn't get particularly interesting quickly enough. So for me, one big tipping point for me was I was at 40 to 45 properties, and I realised I was spending, say, 30% of my time on management, and that just didn't stack up, because management could be delegated. It could be done by someone who ultimately is doing a £10 an hour job, not by me, who was potentially doing deals that were maybe worth 10, 15, 20, 25 grand a pop, and I'd be much better off spending my time doing those deals. So when I freed that management time up and also recapitalized and did some of that securitizing I've just been talking about as an answer to Sue's question, that was probably a real big tipping point for me, because then I went from 40 or 45 to doubling that portfolio in 12 months. So I would have been, but I would say, I still say to people, I think, you know, you said there you bought 3 units last year. Can you buy 6 units next year? Quite possibly, depending on your position. And you don't have to go hell for leather like that necessarily, but you can imagine if you buy 3 last year, 6 this year, 12 next year, it doesn't take long to be at the big double digit purchasing. And then you may find yourself like me, sitting there thinking whether you should or shouldn't buy an 82 unit portfolio. So compound interest, I mean, there's no better example of compound interest than the coronavirus, I don't think, because you're just seeing how many more cases are happening every day, because there's exponential growth. And just don't forget, exponential growth is out there for all of us. So I think that's hopefully somewhat helpful on the answer to that question.
Okay. I think I was trying to promote Tunde onto the panel.
Okay.
So he can talk, but somehow I lost him. I don't know if he actually signed out. But anyway, I hope I didn't cut him off by error. But
hopefully you can watch the recording if he has signed out, Sam. But
yes, I'm actually I'm going to learn this. Okay. Okay, and then you can look at the a few more questions.
Yeah, sure. So
and then
I can do Khalid's next, hopefully. Apply for HMO with buy-to-let mortgage property. Probably, Khalid, if you could maybe give a bit more info on that, or maybe Sam could try and get you back on the panel and ask that one live, because I need a little bit more detail there in order to try and answer that one.
Khalid, where are you? Let me get onto the panel. Okay, yeah, Khalid, this is here. Okay, Khalid, I'm gonna promote you to the panel so you can ask that question live. Yeah. Okay. Khalid, can you hear me? Khalid, you're now on the panel. Oh, okay. Let me Okay, absolutely.
Use your mighty powers to unmute him, Sam.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yes, I didn't do that. Unmute.
Hello.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, Khalid. Yes, we can.
Yes. Hi. Yes, I heard a lot of information about. Can you hear me? I don't know what happened.
Yeah. You can start the video. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. My question is should I take a consent from the lender for if I want to apply for HMO? Some of them, they told me you don't have to. You just apply for HMO, and the only thing is you're risking the insurance or something like that. So I need to hear your opinion about this.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Khalid, but what you're saying is, can you create an HMO from a property you've got on a buy-to-let mortgage?
Yes.
So yeah, you definitely need the lender's consent to do that. I think what maybe the message you've been receiving from people is it potentially invalidates the insurance, which it almost definitely would. But also the concern for me would be you're breaching the terms and conditions of your mortgage. And that's not something that you want to be doing, because one black mark in that department could be really, really damaging. So I'd be cautious. I'd be approaching the lender. There are products that are specifically out there to create HMOs, bridge to let style projects, and they might be much more suitable for making a property into an HMO. I think the thing is, if the numbers don't stack up for you to do it properly with the proper products, it's probably not a deal in the first place. And that's the mantra I would live by, really. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay.
Should we do Mel's question there, Sam?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes.
Do you want to try and get Mel on again to talk, because that seems to be working quite well?
Let me unmute Mel.
Okay.
And then promote
Hi.
Panel. Okay, Mel. Yes, you got it. Yes.
Hi, Mel.
I am back on now. Good. Can you hear me, Adam?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Were you able to see my question?
Yes, so it's a two-part question.
Yes.
First part, how much as a minimum starting capital would you say one would need to start a business in rent to rent? Well, that wasn't my route in, Mel, to be honest, so I can't answer that with authority.
Okay.
But I would say I do know people who've done it with very small amounts of money, and that really has been the attractive thing for them. So it's one of those things that can be done if you've got the time and you've got the volition and you've got the drive. You don't necessarily need lots and lots of money, but you do need time, because you will find it's you get a lot of knockbacks before you get a few yeses, realistically.
Okay.
And so I didn't, as you put there, your second one, how did I start my rent-to-rent business?
Yeah,
So
I thought that's what you'd said.
No,
Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah.
What I was saying earlier was, I know that it's a way that people get into property investment.
Oh, I see.
I think it can be sometimes the only valid way they can get in. So I get it, but no, I didn't do it myself. So sorry for leading you down the wrong path there.
That's okay. That's okay.
Then
Right. Thank you.
All right, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay, Adam, just there are quite a few questions coming up, but before we move on back to the audience, I've got one more, well, a few more that I'll throw in. One of the important ones is strategy. How important is an investment strategy in properties? Should people come in with a strategy and stick to it, or should we follow the wind because it's so windy? Sometimes the property industry right now that you're not sure if you should follow the wind or stick to your guns and say, this is my strategy, I've come here to do this, and stick to it. What is your take on that?
Yeah, another really good question, Sam. And I think it's Gale Force 12 at the moment, isn't it, realistically, on the Beaufort scale. So I think it's important. It's really, really important to plan. So I should make that really, really clear from the start. I'm a big fan of planning. You need to do it. If you don't do it, time can pass you by. Things will drift by. Things will come along. And that really relates into one of the other big points I'd make about how I've been able to scale my portfolio, which has been by focusing really, really hard on it. And if you don't have a plan, it's quite difficult to get that level of focus in the first place. But having said what you said there as well, I think you also have to be cognizant of the fact that your plans have to be fluid. Any strategy is fluid. You can write plans for 1, 3, 5, some people even do it for 10 years. I think that's a big, long time horizon to do it over. But there's no point sticking to it while all the bells are going off in the background and it's clear you need to do something else. So I would always understand that you need to react to things that are going on. I find it more helpful to react more quickly. But when I say react quickly, I don't mean get into a panic and go and buy 500 toilet rolls or whatever. I mean, it can be easier to be out of something before it looks worse than it, before everybody else wants to get out of it, put it that way, rather than hang around and wait to see what everyone else is doing and then jump on the bandwagon and follow them. I like the old, I think it's Albert Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing as everybody else and expecting a different result. I think there's an awful lot of truth in that. So I like to try and lead the charge in what I'm doing. So to give you a specific example, I started buying properties in South Wales very, very soon after the referendum result in 2016, because I saw the market gap down. I heard about the toll coming off the Severn Bridge, and I thought, I'm not so sure Wales is going to have a huge, tough time. And also it was already very, very cheap, and it yielded really strongly, and you could get deals down there. So I did that, and then I gravitated more and more towards the sort of southeast of Wales, where it was near Bristol, near the Severn Bridge. And then 2 years later, probably 2.5 years later, so middle of last year maybe, it seemed like the whole world was onto it, and everybody was looking to buy properties in South Wales. That's the point at which I said, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm going to go and do something else. So it was certainly a plan, but there wasn't necessarily a defined end to that plan. The end for me was everyone else is talking about it, and therefore I think it's probably a good time to move on. And also, of course, the deals started getting much tougher to get. they started evaporating. It was just harder and harder to get them at good prices, and I moved to different parts of the UK to get my deals realistically. So yes, plan, yes, have a strategy. That my whole, you know, everything I've done really has been built around that 4 pillars strategy that I presented tonight, but that has to be a fluid thing.
Okay, I think thank you, Adam. I think when we started, I think Agnes had a question, but just before we go back to Agnes, you did mention South Wales and then moving on when everyone was coming down to invest. How do you decide the next place to do? Do you have your kids put them on a map wherever they
try the dots?
Exactly. So how do you decide? Do you follow the news? I mean, what process do you go through to pick the next big place?
Great question again. So I use a number of different sources. I like to read Property Investor News every month because it contains brilliant data.
I guess Ranjit probably put that one in. So I think Ranjit will know. At least Ranjit is not here, but at least he's been represented. Yeah.
I'm not as good looking. I'm not as funny. I'm not as popular. And I'm not as friendly as Ranjit. But yeah, no. Honestly, it's a brilliant magazine, and it does. The reason I like it is because it has a lot of data in it and a lot of fact, and it's not a speculative thing. So that's one definitely good source that I use. Another really good source is a website called Property Data. That's run by a guy called Michael Dent. Brilliant website, and not an expensive tool. You can spend lots and lots of money on these analytics tools, thousands of pounds a month if you want to. Property Data is a fraction of that cost, and it's got some fantastic stuff on it. So that will have a lot of good details on you in terms of geographical locations. You can look at things by yield, you can look at things by particular tenant types, you can look at things by major infrastructure projects, which I'm a big fan of looking at, by the way. And you only have to look at things like the London Olympics, for example, or Crossrail, or HS2, or a whole number of other, Hinkley Point. And the projects don't have to be of that size. They have to be something that's going to make a difference to an area. I think connectivity can be massive. So if you drill that down to a much smaller scale, smack in between Derby and Nottingham is a town called Ilkeston, where I own half of a letting agency with an absolutely great guy called Richard Jones. And Richard's an investor in that area. He's lived there all his life. He's been a landlord there for 30 years. And Ilkeston in 2018 was reinstating its train station. So the train station had been there for many years. It had been disused for, I think it was about 40 years. And they brought it back to life, and it now takes people into the centre of Nottingham in 11 minutes. Now that has had a massive impact on a relatively small town. It's made HMOs by the train station become viable. It's made property prices and rents around there climb up a bit because Nottingham is so much more expensive. It makes sense to live 10 minutes away on the train for tenants and get a property at 200-300 quid a month cheaper. So it can be relatively small. You know, what was the cost of that station being reinstated? It's probably less than £10 million. So that's a great result for the town. And if you do your research, you can find these little pockets and areas. And I also think probably on the back of that, I'd also say one of the key things I look at is demographics in terms of population growth. So I'm looking for populations that are growing. There's nothing more damaging to an area than population shrinking. That's what you see in a lot of towns in the northeast, for example, and that's why it leads to very, very suppressed, almost depressed property prices, really. The population shrinking, it normally means everyone's having to leave that area to find work elsewhere because there's no work there. Who gets left behind? LHA tenants, and it's going to be, without trying to be disrespectful, it's going to be bottom of the market stuff, and it's not the stuff that you want to be dealing in realistically, not over the long term. So those are the sort of things. Hopefully that's reasonably helpful, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I think, well, I've got one more, but I think I'm going to let Agnes just break off. Agnes, can you hear me? Agnes, I think are you there? Okay, maybe, okay. While Agnes is getting ready for her question, I think you kind of like answered this question a bit without knowing that you probably read my mind. You mentioned about having an estate agency with Richard that owns a lot of properties and has been a landlord for 30 years.
Yes.
it seemed to me that there's a pattern to the kind of people that you take on as JV partners. There's a pattern emerging for your JV partners. So at this point, I just want to ask you, how do you decide a JV partner? I mean, do you, from having Richard as 30 years in a local area, knows that area, just without answering the question for you, how do you look and source a JV partner?
Okay, well, the first and most important bit is that we have to have the same values. If you try to work with people who don't have the same values as you, it will not work out in the long run. I can categorically state that. So I got to know Richard. We had a lot of stuff in common, but most importantly of all, we have the same values. He's a really, really straight guy. He tells you what he thinks. He doesn't sugarcoat stuff. If you need to hear the truth about something, he's going to give it to you. But also, he's one of the most knowledgeable people. He created the only letting agency in the UK that could ratify housing benefit claims in-house, because going back a decade, Ilkeston had a lot of housing benefit tenants. And so he literally rose to the top of that game. So they had such a strong relationship with the council, underwent verification framework training, and they could stamp the claims inside the letting agency. Quite an incredible thing. And Richard had also gone on and pioneered a great product, working with a few other guys, called the ARC Passport, which unfortunately wasn't as successful as it should have been, but what it was effectively a passport which included rent guarantee insurance for LHA tenants. Again, the only product to do that in the UK. He was hoping to get councils to take it up so they could encourage private landlords to house tenants on benefits. And I'm sure in the future that will be revisited. But it really was A, his values being the same as mine, and B, his knowledge and his happiness to share that knowledge with me and with other people that made me know. And also his investment strategy, very, very sensible, very, very good at doing deals, could do far more skilled than I am in terms of he could do the work himself on a house if that's what needed to be done. Knows all the trade skills. He literally built his portfolio with his bare hands. I suppose as I've gone on and on, I've tried and work with the best people in the game that have either propositioned me as a JV partner, or I've seen an opportunity to say, Richard, ultimately, the business, he had a business partner in there. It wasn't working out that well. They were looking to sell the business, which I said I was surprised about because it obviously manages Richard's portfolio as well. And I just asked the question, and then 6 months later, we were business partners, and I managed to buy in at a good price. And then since we did that, we also achieved the goal of buying a number of units in the local area, which, as I said, Ilkeston stacks up really well from a yield perspective and from a capital. If you look at the capital growth last year, it put on 9.1% or something like that. So I think it's the second best growing town in the UK. So it's a really, really good little area. So all roads kind of led to Rome, I guess, Sam. And I think, you have to also Richard and I understand each other, and we understand what we're both going to be able to do in terms of time commitments. We also understand what I might be able to offer. Again, like I said earlier on, good partnerships, you'll have strengths and weaknesses in different areas. It's about seeing where they are and being able to bounce ideas off each other, and then just be able to go forwards, really. And that's what we've managed to do.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. It's okay, now I find out why Tunde couldn't talk, because he was muted. Let me unmute Tunde, see if I can get him involved now.
Okay.
I just can't unmute him. It's not happening. Okay. I'm trying to get Tunde to say, is Agnes back? Okay. And then, okay, I think there's a question here from an architect. Can you see it? Your panel on it. Okay, no, he says he wants to be on a panel. He's an architect for 30 years. Okay. Who's that? Is that?
That was Roy. Yeah.
Roy. Yes. Okay. Good. Great. Yeah, okay. I think I'll contact Roy. Yes. It will be great to have him on. Okay. Any more questions on the?
There's one more in the Q&A there, Sam, from Pete Enkefelak. If Pete's here, maybe you could find him and ask the question if that's possible.
Okay. Is that Peter? Yeah.
Just read it out.
Let me find Peter on here. Get him on. onto the panel for Peter to ask that question himself. Okay, let me see. Oh, okay. Yep, I've got him. Okay, let me promote Peter to the panel. Okay, fine. And then while everyone else is getting ready, I've still got quite a few more questions for you. Okay. Okay, Peter? Peter,
Yeah, hello.
Okay, hi, Peter. Yes, over to you, Peter.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Hi, Sam, and hi, Adam.
Hi, Prince.
Yeah, just introduce myself. Yes, I'm Peter and Califakia. It's my first time to have to listen to you guys. I think I've missed my first invite. What I'm interested in is I'm an accidental landlord and I'm about to build a property portfolio. So I don't have that much money. I could raise maybe 20K working full time. So my question is, what's the best way to start? How can I get started with about 20 to 30K?
So I would answer that, Pete, by saying ultimately the difficulty is even if you go out and buy a cheap property like some of the stuff that I buy, and it's going to cost you most, if not all of that 20K for the deposit, the stamp duty, the legals, then you'll own another property, which is great. That property will probably cash flow you maybe 250 quid a month by the time you've paid all your costs and everything else. And then you're not going to have that 20K anymore because it's going to be stuck in the property.
Yeah.
So it's quite tough to find that to be enough to be getting on with. You could, and the difficulty here will be finding the deals that make this stack up. But what you could do, what I do sometimes, and I've done with probably the least I've ever put into a deal when I've been using my own money, is about 8 or 9K, because I've been able to buy a property very, very cheap using bridging finance. It's only taken a very small deposit, so I might only have to put £3,000 or £4,000 into it on the bridge, and then use the rest of that money for legal fees, usually no stamp duty at that sort of level, and then refurbishing the property and then refinancing it. So in the ideal world, something that you maybe buy at 35K, you might have to spend 15 on it, let's say, but then it's up to 50, and then it revalues at 75, and you can refinance it to get all of your 50 back out, pay the bridge off, and also maybe even have a bit of money left over. Yeah. Now, I've just made that sound really, really easy, and it's not really easy, of course.
No, because I'll be stepping on to my next question now. How do you get this property then? Is it an auction or just maybe an auction? And that's, again, something that I'm not used to and something that I got to learn about. I know you've mentioned listening to you. It's been educative, and I probably would like to attend a bit more of these sessions. Yeah, that would be my next question. Yeah, it doesn't sound easy. I think I know that because I've been trying to get to learn a few of these myself, but it's really been difficult. So having to listen to people like yourself and Sam.
Yep. Well, Sam does some great stuff. Sam puts lots and lots of time in and gives lots and lots of stuff away for free, and does some very, very cheap stuff that's got some super content in. So Sam will know the sorts of auction. Now, ultimately, if you're going to pull off that sort of thing, it's not going to be in London. You're going to have to go out to the provinces somewhere to get deals of that size that are going to stack up to do that. But Sam will tell you more about the auction side of it.
Where are you based, Peter?
I'm in Maidstone in Kent.
Okay, down Kent. Okay, because Kent area does have good stock. But of course, you're open to anywhere in the country, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, if you're short in finance, you got to be ready to travel, and that's a compensation. So yeah, I'm open to go anywhere. Anyway.
Oh yeah. Then do you attend any events right now, like networking events at all?
Well, no, I do now. I've tried to, as I mentioned before, coming to your one, but there is one. I think now I'm really interested now. I think I'm able to make the time to attend more.
Okay, I think probably we can talk after. I was probably saying we'll have a portfolio for sale, but it can be they can break it up about 9 properties from Wolverhampton, HMOs, Doncaster, Birmingham. So it's quite a fair bit. It's a very good mix of property.
Okay.
The vendors, they're quite happy to split up
So
the
split.
yeah,
Okay.
they will sell individually, and like I said, it's already been sanitized in terms of all the paperwork has been prepared,
Okay.
listed at auction, so you can do it very quickly. You don't need to go through a lengthy to and fro of solicitors.
That sounds it sounds really interesting and a good start. Okay.
So what I'll
Right,
do,
thanks.
I'll get that sent through. I'll email that portfolio to everyone after this. Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, thank you very much.
yeah, we can talk later. And then I think James had a question. Let me unmute James. See James.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Sam. Bye.
You're welcome.
Hi, James.
Hi, Sam.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. You're on now. You can start a video if you want to do video notes.
I saw your thing. I'm not.
Okay. No, if not, you can just go on. Okay.
There we are.
On. Yeah. Okay.
So I put my hand up and I put it back down again, but I'll ask anyway. There's loads of questions. I think for me, it's very much trying to get in front of either brokers or lenders that are particularly interested in releasing this equity. So I've got a property portfolio that's probably 65% loan to value. Historically, I wanted to work to 75% loan to value. And I think, bearing in mind the rates that are available, it might be a good time to release money, probably going a bit more risky than historically I have done. But I don't want to go trailing from bank to bank. So it's really one of those personal ones. I'd like to get in front of somebody who either has a panel of banks that you can go to, or a bank that's interested in a small landlord like me. And that might be able to help. I don't know.
So just Adam, before you take on, do you have the properties in your name or in a company name?
All in my name for now, but any
okay
will be by company.
Okay, that's fine. Adam.
Yeah, sure. I would say, James, I mean, at a really simple level, I think you've got two choices. You can either take out the existing loans by doing a new first charge loan at 75%, which is your stated target, as you say. Hopefully maybe at a lower rate than what you're paying now. The benefit of the personal name, the downside obviously is the tax position these days, but the benefit of the personal name is still that it still can be considerably cheaper to raise finance in your personal name than it is in the limited company. So sometimes it's he giveth and he taketh away, I suppose I would say. So one option would be new first charge loan. Another option might be a second charge loan. If your existing stuff is on particularly low tracker rates, for example, which if they are on tracker rates, they've just gone down another 15 basis points not long before the start of this meeting. So it might be worth preserving those and getting a second charge in behind those rates. And for both of those things, you want to see a capable broker who can help you out with that. And I know Sam had someone there with us last month who might be willing to help you out there. And I'm not sure if Sam works with any other brokers as well, but any capable broker should be able to talk you through either of those options, and both of them sound realistic, and hopefully they might be available really, really cheaply to you over the coming weeks and months, because it does seem like the Bank of England's quite determined to get some credit out the door quite cheaply.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you.
Any more, James? Is that okay? You got any more questions at all?
No, I mean, in terms of the kind of the strategy, I think I'm quite close with that. It's just, where do I go for money? So I'm happy. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, James. Thank you, James. Okay, then any more? Let me just see who else has a hands up before I then just Adam, while I'm looking for anyone else to ask questions, what kind of verticals, in terms of people scaling in property, what kind of verticals would you recommend for anyone that's in property, apart from just buying more and more properties? Any verticals that people can actually be looking at?
Are you thinking of within property there specifically, Sam, or you're talking about even beyond?
Even within and probably beyond.
Okay. So I mean, obviously, I found it very useful to have letting agency businesses as one of the verticals that I've used. certainly getting involved in an auction company was also a great idea. Estate agency. Business partner of mine has also had mortgage brokerages, which kind of obviously makes sense as well. I know that he's also trying to get involved in law firms over time, which you can imagine if you're doing lots and lots of transactions, you're obviously a valued client on your own anyway, so that can make sense as well, and can give you a little bit of diversification as well potentially. And if you're following, I've always followed quite a laborious strategy around refinancing. So we still refinance our properties, generally speaking, individually. Okay. And so there's lots and lots of remortgage paperwork to be done, but we're quite a profitable mortgage client as well. So that all of those would make sense. I think obviously another vertical that I've operated is by starting my own property network with Partners in Property alongside Sue. And we've run that, and there's a few of the guys and ladies who are signed in tonight are members, and that has been a useful thing, because the point I'm trying to make really is everything pushes in the same direction. So it's a great way to collect like-minded people, bring them together and see if they can do business together, which absolutely has happened through Partners in Property as well. So I think the thing to think about is stuff that can push in the same direction. That doesn't necessarily mean it's so closely correlated that if one thing goes wrong that it completely falls over. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. When is the next PIP in London, actually, so that people could know, maybe know where to meet you in London?
Yeah, we're always scheduled for second Friday of the month. Easter did get in the way next month anyway, but we fully expect to be holding that online, as we did with our Manchester event on Monday, because it's just, while this whole thing is going on, obviously we held the last London meet last Friday. On the day the day before, it felt like the right call to still hold the meeting. The situation changed over the weekend, and we made the call to hold the meeting virtually like this on Monday for Manchester. So our next one will be online. It will be the Bristol meet, and it will be Friday next week. So I think that's the 27th, won't it? And we run them in the daytime. We have our speakers in the morning slots, and then we in the afternoon run our mastermind tables. So we are providing lots and lots of, there's about 5.5 hours worth of networking and content there. So it's a bit of a marathon really, but it's a good thing, and there's lots and lots of, I think at this time we don't struggle to fill the time with all of the things that are going on in the market and beyond at the moment.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems or challenges of running an evening event is that there's not enough time to drill into any content. I mean, like today has been great because we just had you on and we had enough time to just go into the business structure. But usually you have 1 or 2 people to cater for diverse interests. But the result of that is there's so little time, which is why I like about PIP, because you've got a whole day, you can take a particular, maybe say auctions or business structure, and you have 1 or 2 hours. And then especially the mastermind tables, so you can actually straight away have a break room with people on the same table that have expertise in what exactly you're looking for. So I would strongly recommend PIP for anyone that really wants to scale, like people that have asked, they're looking at scaling the next couple of years. When you sit on a table, mastermind table with people that are experts in commercial property, you can ask questions to them, which is great.
Thanks for that, Sam. I really appreciate the shout out. That's appreciated.
Oh yeah, no, it's we're trying to recommend all good things to people to make sure everyone is moving. I think we believe if the whole market moves in the right direction, like you say, not pulling anything back, everyone benefits from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Q&A. Any more questions that if not that's not been dealt with? I think we had Brendan from online. He had his hand off for quite a while, but I think he's gone off now. Brendan, let me see if he's still there. No, I think he's gone off now. Okay, so let me see. Do we still have any? Cool, we still got about 10, 15 more minutes. If not, we look through the list. Is there anything that you haven't dealt with?
There's no more questions popped up on the written Q&A there at the moment, so I'll just have a quick look through and see if there's anybody we've missed out or anyone we haven't mentioned. I think we've been through. Oh yes, someone did ask me how can, I'm not sure if other Sam is still online, but it's a great question at the moment. How concerned are you holding so much property in this period? Brilliant question, because obviously it hasn't necessarily felt the greatest being quite so sizable, although the idea of having, the reality is the best bits of having 250 units are, they're all, and they're deliberately diversified, so they're scattered all around the country, all over the UK, different employers, different tenant types, different ages, different jobs, different sectors. It's as diversified really as I think you could probably get. And what that means is not everyone's been affected in the same way by what's going on. Now, having said that, obviously the idea of if we're going to go into, you know, lockdown or whatever the country's going to go towards next week, almost everybody could be affected. Now, what we're finding is we try to manage the tenancies on a relatively relational basis. So one particular tenancy manager who is absolutely spectacular with people. The tenants talk to her like she's a friend, but she's very, very direct with them when she needs to be. She explains what they need to do to sustain their tenancies. We tend to find that, you know, 90% of people are pretty good, pretty honest, pretty much. We have a pretty good stringent referencing process. These people, I've spoken personally myself to 3 tenants today, which is not something as a rule that I do anymore. But I spoke to 3 of them because 3 of them were particularly concerned. And I said to the guys, I said, look, give me their number, let me call them, because I don't want people going around being incredibly anxious and super concerned at the moment. And all of those people who are, one of them who's paid their rent this month is just worried about next month, reassured them somewhat and said, you know, if we need to come up with a plan, we'll come up with a plan. But the important thing to communicate to your tenants at the moment is this is not a rent-free period. If you get a rent holiday, you're just going to go into arrears. We don't want you to go into arrears. My experience of people going into arrears is they struggle to get out of arrears. Let's come up with a plan. And number one, let's just make sure we communicate during this time. So one of the tenants who rang me today is actually, she's a commercial and residential tenant, so she's got a mixed-use building and she lives upstairs. We've already worked out what's going to happen over the prevailing 3 months. And that's on the basis that we spend 3 months having to isolate, which I just think the economy and the Prime Minister and everybody else is not going to go down that route, because it would be really, really, really significantly damaging. So I think we might spend 4 weeks indoors, and then the damage being caused by us all staying indoors is going to be greater than the damage we would cause if we go outdoors. That's just my personal theory at the moment, but with 4 to 6 weeks looks like a likely period of social distancing or whatever you want to call it. And I think we'll probably get through that. So it's obviously, I think what I like to try and do is get ahead of what's coming, as I said, and have an idea of what I'm going to do next and why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting. And when I answered Sam's question there about strategy, you know, that spoke very much towards how I feel about being fluid. There's never been a time more than this to be fluid. I think not being on top of the situation right now would be a shame, because I think we might in the next 3 to 6 months see the greatest buying opportunities we've seen for a number of years. You've got a really interesting market here where the first 2 months of 2020, there was definitely a Boris bounce. There was a lot of bravado, a lot of blood and thunder out there. And now it's gone into a huge reversal very, very quickly.
After the first auction, after the general election, I went online to say the market is back. You know,
Yeah, that's there, myself.
It was quite exciting. We thought everything was back, but suddenly it seemed to have gone again.
Hello, I'm here. Hello.
Okay. So Brendan, I think I'm trying to get.
Peter's here.
Oh, hi, Peter.
Oh, Peter, do you have a question again?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have loads of questions.
Okay. I think I actually forgot to meet you, which is why you came on. Actually,
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So before we come back to you, let me just make a comment actually about this thing. I mean, I know this webinar is being recorded, but I'm going to say this comment it's only between us here and it's off record rather, I should say, even though this is being recorded. As we know, next week, most of the auctions that are going on next week would go online and by telephone. Because we work with quite closely with quite a lot of auction companies in the next couple of weeks. So we've had quite a lot of conference calls with auction companies that we have stock in to find out what will happen. But one of my greatest concerns, which no one has any answer to this, which I want to share your thoughts on this, is that one of the, for me as a trader, I love doing auctions because of the contract. Because the moment that gravel comes down, you pay your 10%, you're not moving on. From there, you have to buy. And I had people that have bought from auction to try to change their mind, who say, no, you got to go through with it. Again, with time, they're happy. But let's take a situation where there's a lockdown tomorrow, as people might expect, and someone was to buy in their home online and to buy a property. How binding is that contract if someone can say, oh yeah, because there's a lockdown, my solicitor could not do things on time? I think personally, and this is something I've raised to quite a few auction companies, which is why I said it's off record, because they're still trying to find what solution there is for that. But that's my concern, is that how solid are those contracts if we are effectively if there's a lockdown, means we are at war. So how can you hold a man responsible for not delivering money when the country's at war? Adam?
Brilliant question, Sam. It's really, really, really good thinking. And I think this is exactly why the law can be quite interesting and how precedent is created, isn't it? I mean, I would say you could probably put as many things in the special conditions as you wanted to say, regardless of this, that, or the other, you're going to have to fulfill the contract. However, and I'm not a lawyer, just like I'm not a financial advisor, but I do know the basics of contract law. And if the contract is frustrated by the inability to conclude the contract by an external force majeure like that, then it would be very, very difficult to enforce that contract. And I think the other flip side of that is, even if you serve notice and then you go into potential litigation, I mean, ultimately, if you're the seller and you want to keep the deposit, or if you're the buyer and you want to try and pull out, taking either side to court at the moment, if the country's locked down, is going to be an impossibility.
Absolutely.
So it might be a bit of a moot point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I've looked at it. And what I've done for some of the stock I have of my clients, I've been saying to them, please, let's knock down the gravel. Let's buy before auction. Do it today and exchange while the country is still okay. So yeah. I hope any of my clients are online. So let's do it tomorrow.
Yeah, really good point, Sam. I think, and the thing is, I think you'll find some vendors super motivated at the moment.
Absolutely.
So that would be a really good way to get the hammer down on a good deal. Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, my vendor for the portfolio up north, he wants to move into development and he would really want to sell. So we actually are trying to get someone to actually just buy the lot from him, and he will be quite happy to have it knocked down tomorrow. And then so that way he knows if there's a lockdown, he's got a contract that can be respected. Because I strongly, on a personal note, I think any contract entered into next week, maybe apart from a marriage contract, I think it will be quite difficult to keep, so
it's going to be quite difficult to get married if we're in lockdown.
Exactly. I'm not trying to, I just said, I just not encourage people to think, okay, let me get married next week and I don't have to keep the contract. So, okay, Brendan, I'm going to unmute you. I think you had your hands up for quite a while. Brendan, are you there, Brendan Quinn? Let me see if Brendan can come on. Hi, Brendan. Brendan. Okay. Oh yeah, I think I have to unmute you again. Oh, I'm trying to unmute him. Brendan. Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
Sam?
Yes, you're on now. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for the session tonight.
Okay.
I really don't have any questions though. So thanks, Adam. The only question I have is in terms of practicality, Sam. The date when Aaron is doing the event in April. Can you just remind me what date it is?
It's on the 2nd of April, from 12 o'clock. Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. So yeah. So we will be doing that again online, because the auction company on that day, we've had a chat with them. The auction for network auction will be online as well on that day. Again, like I've done to every auction company that I've spoken to, I've posed my question and said, how are you going to do if we have a lockdown? So, I mean, I'm hoping that there wouldn't be an official lockdown, because if there is, then it creates a precedent or a situation that's presented where if someone can physically not do certain things by law, and we're expecting them to deliver money, a solicitor might be on a lockdown. So there are quite a few things that might, but yeah, okay. So, and Brendan, just say, Brendan as well runs quite a few fantastic events in central London. Last Saturday, Brendan, we're at the Commercial Summit.
It was about 10 days ago, Sam. So.
Wow, it's amazing. We're so busy that the whole.
Good timing, Brendan. Well done.
Yeah.
I know. I was very lucky.
Yeah, well, it's a great one. I enjoyed it. Good quality speakers as well. So it was fantastic event. I love it. Yeah. So
there's a question there in the chat from Patrick. I don't know if you want to try and get Patrick on the
okay. Let me
on the panel there so he can ask that.
Yeah, let me get Patrick on. Yeah, Patrick. Okay, let me get Patrick on. Okay. Okay. Patrick on the panel. Let me get Patrick to be able to talk. Yeah. Okay, Patrick. Yes. Okay, Patrick. Yeah, go on. Yeah. You have the mic, Patrick.
I think Sam, it looks like he hasn't got a microphone connected. I don't know if that's correct, Patrick.
Oh yeah, Patrick, I can see you shaking your head.
But he's shaking his head. Yeah. Well, let me read it out, Patrick, and I'll do my best. So,
okay, use sign language. Yeah.
Patrick says you can give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down, Patrick. We'll see how I get on. How would you go about buying a property? Duplex house above a restaurant with a 15-year lease. And if you sold that property, would you have to pay capital gains tax on the lease extension? So I'm assuming you mean the restaurant underneath has got a 15-year lease on it. Yep, okay, thumbs up, that's a good thing. And then,
can you talk now?
I don't know, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you now, brilliant.
Oh, yes. I'm not really good at using these stuff, you know. Good evening, gents.
Good evening.
Patrick.
How you doing, Adam and Sam? Yeah, I've just wanted to, some deals that you get, they have short leases on either flats or whatever, and sometimes you can get a really good deal, but the lease extension can cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it could be up as much as £150,000 to extend the lease.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to know is, if you sold after extending the lease, say for 150, let's say, if you sold it, would you have to pay capital gains on that because I've raised the price of the property now?
I get you.
So, Adam, I'm glad you. That's a very good one, Adam. For your answer, that's a great one, because I've done quite a few lease extensions.
Very tough question.
Most of my clients I've done it for, they've remortgaged, they haven't sold it. So I've not experienced someone buying and selling on. But I do have one in Hampstead now that requires about 150,000 to extend the lease. So I'm very interested to know what the answer is. Adam, please fire on.
No pressure. I love these. It just makes me convinced that I should definitely be the freeholder of some of these places. 150 grand for a lease extension. That's a lot of money. But yeah, the answer, Patrick, is it would be an allowable cost against the sale. So if you bought that in your own name and it was 150k for the lease extension, let's say you bought it for 150, you spent another 150 on the lease extension, and you sold it for 450 at the end. There's a nominal profit there of 150 grand. Obviously, there's 300 grand uplift on what you paid for the property in the first place.
Yeah.
So there's 150 grand profit after the lease extension costs. So it's the 150 you'd be taxed on, not the 300, which I think is what you're asking.
Okay,
so the 150 lease extension would be an allowable cost.
Okay, so anything after the lease extension and the costs, the profit would then be capital gains.
And any capital works that you had to do on that property, any legal costs, stamp duty, all of that would be allowable on the sale before the duty kicked in.
Because I was told that on that 150, you'd have to pay capital gains on it of 20% or 28% or something.
No, that wouldn't be correct.
Yeah. No, thanks, Patrick. That was a great question, because yeah, I've certainly done a lot of lease extensions for clients. When we bought it, had a delayed completion, extended the lease, and then just exit by them being their own exit strategy.
Yeah.
They refinance, take all their money out. Done one or two recently in Ealing, but I've not done one where we've actually had to sell it off on the market. But yeah, so good shout. Actually, I definitely learned a lot from that.
Okay.
Let me see who else had a question in the yes, 9 o'clock now. We should be rounding down. Let me see. The who was Richard? Richard had Richard, are you still there? Let me see. I saw Richard. Oh, okay. Richard.
No, I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm trying to get Richard to okay, yeah, okay, let me
you may have to mute Patrick.
Yeah, Richard.
I'm still here.
Sorry, Patrick.
Oh yeah, okay, let me get you out while I'm trying to get Richard on. Yeah, so that's interesting. Okay, so I'll change your role back to attendee. And Richard, are you ready to okay. Richard, yeah, okay. You had your hands up for a while, but yes, you're on now. Yeah, Richard, go on. Richard?
Hi, Sam. Which Richard are you referring to, Sam?
Woodstock, yes. So you had your hand on for a while before, but do you have any question on?
I think I may have pocket dialed you or pocket put my hand up there, Sam. So no question, but it's been fantastic, really enjoyable. So yeah, thanks again for putting it on. Okay,
thank you. Then okay, let me see. Anyone else? Okay. I
see Sue Maxwell Smith's got a hand up there, Sam, as well.
Yeah. Sorry, which one?
Sue Maxwell.
Okay. Okay, Sue. Let me go back to. Let me get her back on. Okay. 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 Let me get her back on before. Then while you prepare for your roundup, let's get Sue back on. Okay. Okay. All right, Sue. Okay, can you hear us? Yeah. Okay. Let me promote her to panelist. Okay. Sue, can you hear me?
I'm here now. You got me?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, it was a follow-on from Patrick and his question about the £150,000 lease extension.
Okay.
Yeah, if he's buying it to sell it, it won't be capital gains tax, it will be income tax.
Okay.
That is a very valid point, Sue, and I did gloss over that a little bit too easily. But Sue's very right in as much as what Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs are interested in is your intent when you buy it. So if your intent when you buy it, and it would be a good idea to document that intent to your accountant or similar, at least a reliable person. If your intent when you buy it is to hold it for investment purposes, and then your intent changes and your intent becomes to sell it, then you do sell it and you sell it successfully, then by the letter of the law, capital gains tax would be due. The truth is, if you do buy and sell it, and I think the reality is if you do it once, that may be okay, regardless of your true intent, it will be back to your stated intent. But if you do it again and again and again, then you will be deemed to be trading rather than investing, and therefore CGT would not be liable, would not be due, but income tax would be due. So that is a very good point, Sue. Thank you very much. I was lazy there, and you stopped me from being lazy, so well done. Thank you.
Why do you want us to inadvertently give wrong advice?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so it's always good to have you on, so which is good. Yeah. So any more any comments, any questions at all? Okay. So
Sorry, yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Good evening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just see. Got quite a few more questions here, but I think we've gone past our 9 o'clock. So if you just maybe round out. Is there any more questions at all? I think we've dealt with all the questions that are on the Q&A. So any your final thoughts? I mean, just before we go, I just wanted to touch on mindset. I do have quite a few questions on here, but I think we've gone past our 9 o'clock. How important is mindset when in terms of investment?
Sam, the timing of some of your questions tonight has been absolutely fantastic, and I mean, right now it's more important than anything. I mean, you saw some of the questions in there tonight around, you know, for example, how comfortable are you holding a lot of property at this time? It's incredibly important. I've never met a successful investor who hasn't got an exceptional mindset. I was not a big believer in this stuff 4 or 5 years ago. I thought it was a load of gobbledygook, if I'm honest with you. And then ultimately, I'm a relatively open-minded person, and I just saw the common thread between the really high-achieving and the people who had lived through multiple recessions, ultimately, and they were unscathed. They still had their portfolios. They'd survived some tough times, and if there was one thing I could draw together as a common thread amongst all of those people, it would absolutely be their mindset. It would absolutely be it. So in many, and some people say, you know, it's 90% mindset, 10% toolkit. I don't really agree with that either. I think it's 100% mindset and 100% toolkit, because I think you need both, and I think you need both in really, really good quantity. And I think at times like this, especially if we're going to spend an extended period relatively isolated from the people we would normally, you know, I go to a lot of networking events. Obviously, I'm up Partners in Property, you know, once a week. Realistically, I feel quite lonely already, and it's only been a couple of weeks since the last time I was at one. So it's important. You know, this is going to drift into mental health really, but mental health is going to be incredibly important over the next couple of months, because it can be a bit boring and a bit depressing to be stuck inside the same 4 walls every day without people around you. I'm very much a people person. I like to be around people. I like to be around the people who are in my office. And it's more difficult when we're all having to work remotely. So another great question, Sam, and perfect timing. But I think it needs to be at the top of your list, especially right now, because you might well be concerned, and it's very, very common to be concerned in situations like this, because ultimately we're in a situation that none of us can control. I said to someone today, you know, I've spent the last 14 years of my life pretty much preparing for living through something like this. And even so, my mind is still working 5 million miles an hour trying to understand all the permutations of all of these things. And I have to dial it back a bit and say, look, ultimately I can't control what's going on. I can't control what Boris Johnson does. I can't control what the Bank of England do. All I can do is try and react to it sensibly and talk to the people around me, and also, provide support to the partners in property community, which is also providing me with support at the moment. So it's so important. I couldn't tell you how important I think it is at the moment, especially at the moment.
Yeah, and like I said, there will be lots of opportunities out there for us to pick up now and after what's happening now. In fact, I've been running a couple of workshops on property auctions recently, and I try and call the delegates from time to time. And I chatted with one of the ladies yesterday. She was actually on her way to meet the agent because she's got quite a few rent-to-rent SAs. So about 4 or 5 of her guests have cancelled on the same day. So I think there's never been a better time now to come into the market for the new people, because there will be a new order. It's almost like a reset, a reboot that's taking place in the market, and it will open up for new people to come into the market. And talking about what we do, where we work with clients, and I find some of the investment bankers or guys that are very senior in the banking industry that have quite a lot of earnings, and they want to diversify at times into property, but they tend to be the most difficult people to work with, because they're used to working with rich people who have money. So they're trying to maintain their wealth and grow it. Whereas when they come to property, they're trying to create wealth. And it's a different mindset that you require to create wealth and to maintain wealth.
Very good point.
They find it very difficult. It's like, you present them a property in somewhere in the UK, and they worry about what's happening in Sri Lanka, Where it's like, no, it doesn't affect anything here. So it's quite difficult to bring them back to the local mindset to think of the deal and transact. So which is why I thought, let me ask about the mindset, because quite a few of the people that are on here, they're professionals that want to move into property, and that it's a different mindset when you're trying to create wealth from when you work for some rich guy trying to maintain his wealth. It's a whole different ballgame altogether.
Really good point, Sam. Really good.
Yeah. So any sum up close for us? Let's get your final thoughts.
Sure thing. Well, I think I'd say, we've really covered a really wide range of stuff tonight, which I think is absolutely ideal in the current climate. And I'd say what would be the things I really try and draw out for everybody. Recapitalise yourself as quickly as you can. If you've got any remortgages and stuff on the go, I'd be pushing quite hard to get them over the line, just because I think apart from anything else, the banking system's going to slow down. And you just said then, Sam, about potentially auction contracts being frustrated. I think that was one of the real nuggets to take away from tonight, because if the process itself has a problem, that's only going to create even more opportunity at this point. And when chains break down, and there's going to be chains breaking down in this environment, there's more opportunity there. So it's about being in the right position at the right time to take advantage of those things. And I think it's also, your last point will stay with me as well. It's also about maintaining a positive mindset during this time. It does seem today there's been even more clarity around mortgage payment holidays, if that's a situation people are going to need to avail themselves of. And I think working with their tenants and being proactive and getting everybody together through this whole crisis, whilst of course sniffing out the those who use it to their advantage, who aren't necessarily telling the truth, will be key, like it always is. But I think we've got something going on here that's we're going to remember for many years. 2020 will be remembered for this thing. We know that for sure. Keep calm, keep your head, keep trading, and look for some brilliant buying opportunities in the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay, great. Okay, well, so we're there now, but actually on RT's agenda between now and 11 o'clock is networking. So I'm not sure how many people want to stay on network, but what I've been doing frantically, I've been putting everyone on to be onto the panel. So at this stage, I just want to get anyone that has anything to say, just raise your hand. Let me open up your mic. That you can just any comments, anyone got any comments at all? Let me, I think, I don't know, I'm not sure. I mean, this is the first time I'm putting everyone on the panel. I'm not sure if there's any limit, but I'm just trying to put everyone onto the panel. Has anyone got any, Sam, Anif? Anyone got any comments to make at all? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, and you got any comments at all?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yeah,
hear
we
you.
can hear you,
Yes.
Patrick. Yes.
Oh, you can hear me. That's good. You know, they've because of the rules they've brought out now that you can't evict your tenants. Can you still serve them a Section 8 if they're late with their payment after 3 months?
So that, as I understand the emergency legislation, and I don't believe it's been drafted yet to sufficient extent. I think we've only got the high-level details of it at the moment. But as I understand it, what they're doing is extending the period before which you can take any action in terms of serving notices to 3 months, which actually matches the time frame of doing that in Scotland, which doesn't surprise me because I think that's the direction of travel. I did think that we were going to see the straightforward repeal of the Section 21 straight away, I must say, when they said they were bringing other legislation forward, but actually instead we've seen this 3-month protection. And we've obviously at the moment, got a 3-month prevention from serving notices. We've got a 3-month prevention from, we've got a 3-month mortgage rent holiday for tenants, and we've got a 3-month mortgage holiday for landlords if the tenants are benefiting from that payment holiday. So we've got a matched up system at the moment. As I understand it, it's also still allowing proceedings to carry on for notices that were served before this whole thing started. So if you've got anything that's already underway, you should be okay. But as Sam has quite rightly raised tonight, that assumes you'll be able to get to court in order to get to the hearing, or that the judge will be able to get to court. Because I can't see the courts suddenly employing this kind of technology in order to do a hearing, unfortunately. So that there's a lot of, if you've got a Section 8 or a Section 21 underway at the moment, it's really not an ideal time to be dealing with that. But ultimately, this is what we have to face in these situations. And if I get through all of this only having to serve, not serving the odd Section 8 if someone's late on rent, I'll take that right now, Patrick, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think from some of the WhatsApp groups I belong to, I think it's actually on Richard Ealing Meet WhatsApp group. The advice some investors are giving is that if someone's not paying their rent, you serve them Section 8, just then wait. Because once you served it, then once things come back to normal, you can then act on it.
You can then enforce it.
Yeah, just keep going, keep calm, and just keep things going the same way. Yeah.
And one more question. I'm sorry to take up all your time, guys.
No. Now it's networking time now.
Okay.
I think officially we're done, so it's networking time until 11 o'clock. So, but once everyone's tired or Adam's tired, we just keep.
I've got another question. They've talked about you can we're going to have a void period of 3 months where you don't have to pay the mortgage company. But my problem is, how does that affect my credit file? If I go down that road and I don't pay for 3 months, does the Experian know that there's CV19?
Yeah, so I think, as I understand it, that is only available if your tenant can't pay any rent during that period or can pay a very, very low rent. So you're going to need to demonstrate that. How you're going to demonstrate that, I don't know as yet. It's going to be an administratively interesting exercise, but presumably you could show them bank statements if that's what they were looking for. So that's the first thing to point out. The second thing to point out is some lenders have already confirmed that it won't leave a negative mark on your credit file. Some lenders are saying that it will, but in the future that other lenders will know that it was coronavirus related and therefore it's not such a bad thing. My own personal experience from being involved with one of the top 10 mortgage lenders was that whilst Experian, Equifax, Call Credit, all the rest of it exist, they actually have their own process by which they underwrite your credit file. And that's why you very occasionally hear about people who've got credit scores of 999, but they get turned down for credit. And you'll hear about people who have quite poor credit scores, but they actually get accepted for credit because they actually read the file in a different. So every lender will have their own algorithm that reads the credit files, and you would think that they will be sensible enough to put flags in for April, May, and June 2020, let's say. But you know, Patrick, I don't think we can. We're theorising at the moment, aren't we? But I think if you need the holiday because your tenant needs the holiday, the key thing for them to understand is it's put them in arrears. So are you then going to put them on a 12-month payment plan to pay, you know, 25% extra per month for 12 months? Maybe you will, and maybe you'll match that with what the lender does. But my fear is, as I say, when people get into arrears, it's normally harder than they think to get out of arrears. So I myself at the moment are looking at all options, including what a personal loan rate's looking like, what a 0% credit card's looking like, just because to me it seems sensible to have as much credit available as possible, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So why not have as many options on the table as possible? I'd rather be really, really liquid at the moment and be paying interest on that debt than not be so liquid.
Okay, I think we've got Jay. I think Jay, you've had a hand up for quite a while. Jay, are you there?
Hi Sam. Hi Adam.
Hi Jay.
I had a question. So I have 4 small buy-to-let flats, and considering a next purchase, should I consider diversifying, e.g., commercial or HMO, or stick to smaller buyers?
Do you want to have a pop of that, Sam?
Yeah. No. You go on there.
Okay.
Or indeed Adam or anyone else, because now it's a networking period. So I've got everyone. And by the way, this is my first event, virtual event. So I didn't know if there was any limit. So there are 20 of us left now, and I've got all 20 people on the panel. So right now it's a networking, and anyone can talk right now, and anyone can contribute. If you know, if you have any contribution to make, you can make that contribution as well. So yes, so go on, yeah.
So anybody else, feel free to jump in. I'm more than happy to share the questions in the chat here. But Jay, I think the answer is that ultimately has to come down to what you think and how you feel. I don't think there's ever particularly a bad time to diversify. Do you absolutely have to? I'd be asking you questions like, are those 4 flats, are they in the same block? Are they in the same street? Are they in the same borough of London? Are they in the same county?
They're spread between Manchester, Birmingham, and Slough.
Right. Okay. So you've already got quite a nice level of geographical diversification, which is not a bad thing. So I think that's a help rather than having 4 in one building, for example. So you've already done something to diversify that sort of stuff. I think, me personally, I'm not the world's biggest fan of flats, because I think we've already discussed tonight, you know, if you can get 150 grand lease extensions, I'd rather be the freeholder, quite frankly. But I do like really, really high yielding flats that have got short leases and stuff like that. But freehold ultimately is what if you're holding these for, as I said earlier, 20, 30 years, the freeholds are the things that are going to make you the money. So I'd consider getting into freehold, either houses or potentially mixed use commercial, if that's something you want to operate in. I think you also need to, I always say, try and sort of match your skill set and what you want to what you do. So for example, I've got friends who only invest in commercial property because they absolutely can't stand residential tenants. I've got friends who would only do resi property because that's what they know, that's what they love, that's what they understand. So don't just go outside of your comfort zone and your expertise just for the sake of it. Make a plan, make it make sense to yourself, and then go and execute it. Does that help?
Okay, yeah, that's been really good. Just regarding HMOs, then, I've seen a few sort of Is there something that I've missed? How come there's quite a few coming onto the market at the moment?
Are we talking specific locations really, or just generally?
No, just generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a whole number of reasons. There isn't an established or very good secondary market for it. I mean, an HMO is not something you can sell through an estate agency window. It's just not the right thing to do. The marketplace isn't there. People, the agents don't really know what they're selling. They don't know who they need to communicate with. So ultimately, HMOs tend to change hands at auction or direct to vendor. So that's why you might see a few more HMOs. If you look in the auction catalogues, it might seem like there's lots of HMOs for sale because a lot of normal vanilla stuff will just trade through agency windows, whereas all the HMOs pretty much trade through auction. But it could be any of oversaturation in certain areas. It could be people. I think what I've seen with HMO as it goes on for years and years is sometimes people put lots and lots of money into them up front. They make them all singing, all dancing, very good looking things. Then they realise after 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, they can look quite tired and they need another relatively significant refurbishment sometimes. And standards also, if you delivered a brilliant HMO best you could find in January 2018, you may well have woken up in January 2020 and it might not have been the best HMO on the street because standards have been going up and up and up. So there's lots of reasons. I suppose the other reason also would be quite often you see people leave a lot of money behind in an HMO. So it's not uncommon for people to be leaving behind 100k plus in an HMO that they've done. Certainly if they've done it from the armchair. And at some point they're probably going to want to try and release that 100k because they realise it isn't really working that hard for them. So that might be another reason why people might be releasing them. But I wouldn't sort of second guess every single HMO that's for sale as, oh, it must mean the area is oversaturated or whatever. There's lots and lots of legit reasons. I mean, I sold an HMO through an auction middle of last month. Why did I use the auction? Well, number one, like I said, there's no point putting in an estate agency window. And number two, for the disposal, I needed it to be transparent so that the JV partners would see I wasn't unnecessarily profiteering from it. Everybody had a chance to buy it. It got as many eyeballs on it as possible. It came to a quick conclusion. And I suppose the thing is with HMOs, if they're empty, they're even more expensive than your average single let to keep empty because you might have broadband bills, you might have extra things on top, you might have had a cleaner, you might have other arrangements that you're paying for that make them even more expensive. So a quick sale might make even more sense than it otherwise normally would.
Okay, I think one other answer might be some fungo as well. Why are there so many HMOs for sale? Some fungus name can be one of the reasons. Because I have a lot of clients that come, everyone wants to do a flip to make money quick. And I said, it's quite difficult, especially in the south of England, for you to buy a property and sell it and make profit unless you meet someone that is in a desperate situation and you cannot scale a business on a strategy that's incidental. So one of the recommendations I've been making to quite a lot of clients right now is to buy a 3-bed semi, build it out into a 6-room HMO, and then tenant it. And then what happens is that then you can do more, and it's a lot more business for me as well. We can do a bit more of those. Once you have it tenanted and you're making maybe £4,500 rent, as some of them do in London, you can see you're making money every month. It's a fantastic cash flow for yourself. If you have that for a year, you would have made maybe about £40,000, and then we sell it on the yield. And to be honest, I'm selling one now on Byron Road. This guy's owned it for like for about 2 years. It's all fully tenanted. Bought a 3-bedroom semi-detached, made it into 4 HMO rooms, £2,900 cash flow. It's only for 2 years. He's almost selling at the cost of him buying it at the cost of the project, because the 2 years rent for him is like his profit. So I said, now we have to create opportunities. That market where you can buy a property today, paint it, sell it tomorrow for profit is not there in London now. You might get it, it's incidental, if you might, but it's not. If you really need to be in business, you have to look at something that can scale. And that, for me, is one of the strategies that I strongly recommend a lot to my clients. I've got 1 or 2 people that have acquired properties for them. They just bailed it out. One of my clients just finished a project last week. It's tenanted almost immediately. Now she's looking for a new property to do that. So I recommend that they earn for about a year and then sell it on. It's so much easier to sell it on a yield. So that could be one of the reasons why you're seeing HMOs that people have owned for about a year to sell. It might well be the sound fungal effect on that. Yeah.
I like that.
Okay. Any comments? Any questions or comments? Now, like I said, now it's networking. So even yourself, Adam, at any time, this is like a room where you can walk out. You know, if you need to walk out, and you know, any comments at all? I think we're about 18 of us, all panelists now, which is.
Yeah. It's Peter. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to the very interesting conversations. The question I had in mind is, what was that again? Yeah, I want to quit my profession, right? I want to quit my profession because I'm fed up with it. And I want to get into property. I know be difficult to say you need this exact amount of money. But realistically, if I could raise a minimum amount of money that could allow me to leave my job and become a property person, what would you advise? What would you say this amount of money could be that if I have, say, 50 grand, 100 grand, then you could probably say, okay, come, let me hold your hand. I will lead you to the right path. Is that something that you can advise, or you probably have an insight on enlightening me?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll make a comment on that. I think at times, and I've said this at many times when I'm on the panel, that most people think that what is stopping them from going to business is money. I think it's not. Usually it's ideas. Money is very secondary. And I think you're laying a lot of emphasis on money, because money might not be what is stopping you from going in. It could just be, by the way, what do you do now, Peter? What's your profession?
Well, I teach.
You're a teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Funny enough, there's one of the ladies that was on my on the workshop. She used to be a teacher, but now she is a developer. I remember her 5 years ago. She used to come to my events as a teacher, but now I didn't see her for a long time. She turned up at the workshop, and she said now she's a developer, and I'm trying to acquire a building site for her now in Wembley. So from teaching, she's a developer trying to buy a site for about 1.6 million to build out a block of flat. But it's about, again, we say about mindset. Say, if you start going to more events, you could quit your teaching job, maybe go and work in an estate agency office, or even do viewings on Saturday. It's really having the knowledge of the industry, because I think there's so much opportunities in the industry, but you have to be you have to have the right mindset, because if you're just looking at money, if you want to get into if you look at money, if you have £1 million, then you can, if you have a lot of money, then money should be a way in. But if you don't have a lot of money, you need to look at other alternatives, which could be skills, where if you network with the right people, you come across the right opportunities. I mean, often people ask this question like, oh, how much do I need to come in? It's a very difficult question to answer in terms of anyone putting money as an entry, unless you have £1 million. Then it's like, yes, anyone can help you out.
And it's a particularly difficult time. Nobody can advise anybody on that kind of question at the moment. We've never been here before.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's really, if you can even stay as a teacher and do Saturdays with a big, one of the biggest problems that estate agents have is viewing. It's like, at times it's that time, which again, which is why for us auctioneers, we set viewing slots, and then you can get a viewer to open up and everyone comes at the same time. 10 people come. So if you think about it, estate agents will use 10 hours of their week doing viewings. Out for us as auction, we use 30 minutes because we got all 10 people in at the same time. an estate agent will use 10 hours. And when I say 10 hours, that's 1 hour is a short viewing because people will ask, they bring their uncles, they ask about. So I know a lot of estate agents that when I go viewing on Saturday, I notice it's someone that just works for them on Saturday viewing.
Yeah.
You will learn a lot just working
Okay.
on a Saturday on property viewing for a local estate agent.
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot. Just to add on that, is it ever recommended to pay a premium or pay money for someone to start going to teach you some techniques on auction or teach some techniques on conversion to HMO? Is it ever an advisable thing to pay a fee for such an education?
I think when you ask, it's education is education, right? It's what you do with it. It's why you're doing it. Like I said earlier, if you have £1 million and you want to go into property, the quickest way is just go on a training course, get to learn, and then get it done. But if you've got 20,000, your best way is work for an estate agent, weekends, attend networking events, and then get it done. Attend well, when I say we do workshops, the ones that we do, they're quite which are about 99. They're meant to be about £200, but we have an early bird 99. We run it from Hilton or Holiday Inn. It's a day delegate of £42 per person because we do lunch. So we make about £50, which is nothing. But for us, for me in particular, I do lots of big events. I do events with 350 people. I don't get a chance to talk to people. But the workshops, we structure them in tents. It gives me a whole day with people. We have a couple of hours in. We go out for lunch. Everyone goes. It's a buffet lunch in Kensington in the hotel. I get to walk around and get to meet people. Like I said, for me, what I got out of that session on that day is the fact that I'm sourcing a site for this lady, and the two of them, they were partners. They came on it because I get everyone to talk and say what they want to do. So in a way, I listen. The first hour is networking, and the way I do the networking is I get everyone to talk to the group what they do. Why are they here? They say, oh yeah, we're JV partners. We're going to development. We've got money, but we don't know how to find sites. Oh, I've got sites for you. So in a way, this are about £150. You can attend those kind of. But I think what you're asking about is those centers. I will ask you to invest maybe 15,000 for mentorship.
Yeah, a lot of money. Yeah.
But if you have £1 million, then 20,000 is not a lot to pay. But if you have 20,000, then I guess you look at a different path to get into the industry.
I think that's really good, really good, Sam. And I think, Pete, what I would say is there's no shortage of people who will charge you even more money than that. And there's a difference between price and value. And also you need to look out for the people who are the best salespeople. They're generally not the best content deliverers. Sam put it really nicely there, in as much as it makes sense for him to underprice his time to do a day like that, because he's hoping to get business out of it, because he's active and he's finding sites for people. He's got clients. He's putting stuff into auction. He's getting stuff out of auction. He is looking for people to do business with. So it makes sense. It's very transparent. It's easy to understand. There is someone who wants to charge, some people use price as a signal such that it will represent quality. And ultimately behind that, a lot of the time you find that the quality isn't really there. One of the reasons why I enjoy talking to people about property. I enjoy trying to help people with their portfolios and their businesses. I don't train vast numbers of people. The reason why I don't do that is because I'm busy running my own property business. And I can't spare the time to do that, and it wouldn't make commercial sense for me to do that. So if you suddenly saw me pop up and all I was doing was training people how to do it, you'd wonder what the bloody hell had happened to the 250 properties I've told you about tonight, wouldn't you, realistically?
Yeah, I mean, I would, you're perfect. I would wonder, because the question I ask myself is, because I've been to some of these free property seminars where they've wanted to sell you something, pay today, I reduce it to maybe 30%, pay today, and I thought, no. I got to go speak to my wife first. That's always what got me out of the hook.
Good.
And then I said to myself, if you're this rich and have all these properties, what are you doing here trying to get £1,000 off me? So there's always that caveat where you ask yourself those questions and try to be a little bit wise. So yeah, thank you very much for that. It's really enlightening.
You are
Yeah.
welcome.
And
You're
thank you,
welcome.
Sam, for that. I think the Saturday viewing thing is something I really have to consider
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I've never really thought of it. And usually, as you say, networking is the best. I mean, I'd wanted to probably chicken out from this because my phone was vibrating and ringing, and now I'm just so glad I stayed on. And again, I'm not paying anything for this, and the information I'm getting from this is just worthless. I mean, not worthless though, it's just worth so much. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. You're
Again, you
welcome.
see, money is not necessarily value. So I'm
No,
getting so
that's
much
it.
value here
That's
for
it.
nothing, which is
Good.
really great.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Good
I
to
do
know.
appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Okay, we still have 16 people in the networking room. Is there anyone else that wants to still network? We'll miss Vanish Patel now. There's no salsa, right? I think next time I need to make sure Vanish signs on. Maybe we'll find a way to get us to do salsa. You know. Yeah, Richard, I can see if unmute yourself. You're gonna make
I
any
have,
comments?
yeah. I just wanted to say that I did attend that workshop that you did, Sam. And
Okay.
you know, I mean, I go to auctions and have not bought at auction, but have sold at auction. And I've been on another auction course that someone else did, a guy who, you know, wrote a book, basically, or co-wrote a book. And I thought your course was excellent because the other course I went on was very, very good. It explained officially how things work. But what I liked about yours is that you had so many war stories and so many examples of what was actually going on in the room that you know, I wouldn't have realized otherwise. So if anyone's thinking about doing it, I think, you know, Sam is giving amazing value on that course, and enjoyed it, learned a lot, and met some really, really good people. So yeah, definitely recommend that one.
Oh yeah, thank you, Richard. Yeah, no, I think it's for me, I think it's all about sharing the experience. Like I say, one of my claim to fame is that, funny enough, Jay Howard has worked for Auction House now for like 6 years. So I was Jay's first client actually. So he, I think we went to an exhibition and we met just after when he just joined Auction House. And then I invited him to my event, got him to start. In fact, he started speaking at my events. Even he's one of the great top speakers on the circuit. But I always said to him that I need to be getting a commission for every talk he does, and that's how Jay got me now to come and start doing the talk at Auction House before the auction started, or before the auction actually starts. And so one of my claim to fame is after the last 5 years, I've been to every single Auction House auction. So I've got a catalog of stories to say what's happening at auction. So I've seen everything. I think myself and Andrew Binstock will probably been, yeah, he's been the auctioneer for the last 5 years at every single auction. So I've been there. So it's really quite, and apart from Auction House, I attend at least 1 or 2 other auctions every month. So I'm like, you know, every month I'm at 2 or 3 auctions. So I'm definitely pick up something from attending, from hanging around those places. Good. Anyone else? Any more comments? I think we've got about 15 people left, and if everyone, it's Bismarck, you okay. Let me just see. Okay, so if there's no one with any comment to make, we probably say Adam, are you ready to hang up?
Hello,
Or
Sam. Sam,
yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I was giving other people a chance, but if there aren't any other questions or comments, I wanted to ask a question to Adam, if that's okay.
Fire away.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned that your portfolio consists of residential and commercial as well. So you know, at this point, there are people who are thinking about commercial. What, you know, what's your view on you know, the amount of vacancies that there are going to be? Because yeah, sure enough, there are going to be probably plenty of commercial buildings. But what's your thought on what to do with them? You know, you're thinking about demolishing, redeveloping, repurposing. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I think what a few thought. It's going to be quite a long answer, so I apologise in advance, Richard. I think at the moment what's really interesting is what a lot of people aren't normally too interested in is commercial buildings with a a 18-month to 36 to 5-year lease left on them. Whereas at this time, it might be a really, depending on the covenant strength, obviously, which is going to be up to you to establish right now, because what we know about covenant strength needs total re-examination at this point in time. But if there is a good covenant in there, like they're a pharmacy, for example, that'd be a pretty good covenant right now, wouldn't it? Then that might be of interest if there's some development value to that building in the future, because it's something you can buy, ride out whatever's going to happen, collect the rents, and then have a nice development project potentially at the end of it. So I think that's one thing of interest. I think at the moment, what I don't think has necessarily changed is that the way forward is going to be to chunk down some of these units and make them small and available and affordable. And now, of course, the business rates threshold has been temporarily suspended, but that's only for 12 months for anything under, 51k, I think it is. So that's still an attractive strategy to bring things under the RV in terms of square foot for the local area, if that's a possibility, and chunk down bigger units into smaller ones. And I think you're gonna have to think quite carefully about the tenants that you put in. But as I said very early on, I think things like takeaways, for example, that are still going to be looking to expand in this time and are probably not going to be able to service the demand that they've got at this time, especially if we're all stuck at home permanently, semi-permanently. There'll be a few opportunities around that, because my thoughts are this probably takes on for sort of 3 or 4 months, and that'll create some short-term opportunities there. But I think buildings that you can in the medium term develop will remain interesting. I don't know if Brendan wants to check in. Unmuted.
Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I couldn't really hear then.
Maybe Brendan's unmuted by accident. I'm not sure whether he wants to say something or not. But yeah, that's kind of our. So I think, I mean, I'm always of the mindset that commercial carries more risk than resi, and part of that risk is normally around void risk, which is obviously somewhat reduced at the moment, certainly for the next 12 months, in terms of the business rates exposure. But I think it will remain. It's going to remain a pretty. I mean, look, what we've seen so far. Laura Ashley have gone bump. Carphone Warehouse are withdrawing from almost everything. I don't think either of those are anything to do with coronavirus. I think they're both quite poor businesses that are just like the Toys R Us's of the world and the Maplins of the world. It was just anybody's guess what. Spin the wheel. You tell me which year they'll go bust. None of us will be surprised, because they've been out of date businesses for years and years and years. But if you look at what the economic reality of the coronavirus is, it's going to pick on the economically weak businesses. And the high street has suffered quite significantly. And yes, there have been winners, there have been, but at the moment, I mean, I mentioned that I've spoken to a few tenants earlier on. One is a commercial tenant. She runs a small hairdressers. She lets out the back room. She has a chair she leases out to somebody else. She lets out the back room as a nail bar. Pretty difficult when nobody is allowed to go out. But ultimately, I did say to her, well, look, all you've got to do is get through maybe 4 weeks of lockdown and people's hair's still going to grow. So your customers are going to be back in 4 weeks' time. So let's not overreact to how bad or not this is going to be, But a lot of obviously the danger of chunking down the units into these smaller, more accessible units is what you will get the equivalent of the blue collar worker as a commercial tenant. So the covenant strength is particularly weak. So there's pluses and minuses, and I just think if you're someone who's looking to sell a void commercial unit in the middle of a lockdown, you must be one hell of a motivated seller. And with that in mind, there should be some awesome deals to be done. Really.
So what's going on now? Do you think it's just accelerating what was happening anyway in terms of some of those business models that weren't really viable? Trying to shift stock physically on the high street for businesses that really were being taken over by online businesses.
That's a really, really good way of looking at it. I think if you look at the behaviour of businesses, the behaviour of people who've got people working from home, we've had a lot of these tech tools. We've had Zoom for a long time. I'm sure most people on here tonight have known what Zoom is, have used it before in fits and starts. But right now, the likes of the Sams and myself and the yous of the world will be looking towards this technology to keep our networks together for the next few months. It's accelerated what we've got to do, and that's going to happen in retail, that's happening in business, in workspace, in office. It's going to happen in a whole number of other areas, because people are going to, even people who, e-commerce has grown hugely, hasn't it, year on year on year, but this is going to grow e-commerce like nothing else before. You can't get a delivery slot at Sainsbury's or Waitrose or Morrison's or whatever, because all the delivery slots are taken for the next 2 or 3 weeks. They certainly are in my area. So that pushes you more towards Amazon, Netflix, Google, Facebook, Apple. They've had a pretty good couple of weeks, haven't they, realistically?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, about delivery, we're trying to buy a deep freezer, and there's like about 8 weeks wait to get delivery of a deep freezer from a shop. But Richard, that's a great question, because I don't know if Munya is still on. One of my colleagues, new is training in property. He's been to a few networking events, and he keeps getting people saying to him that they want commercial property, shops and uppers. So I said to him that it's a new craze, that him, that he's going to get a lot more people asking him that. We had a viewing today in Burnt Oak. As we were driving down, I showed him a few shops that have been closed for a long time. I said, commercial is nice, but the word I said to him is thick skin. You need thick skin to be in property, in commercial property. You need to be able to have a shop stand empty for 1 or 2 years, whereas in residential, you can repurpose, you can get a lower rent, you can do something quickly to turn it around. But with commercial, if a shop goes out of business, you can be there for about 1 year or 2 before you get the next tenant. However, those people that are saying to him when they come to our events, I'm looking for shops and uppers, they are looking for very specific units, not just any commercial. So they're looking for for things that they can maybe repurpose into residential at the back, where they can do. So when you have a commercial unit that can be repurposed, then it becomes less risky. But just a normal big shop, I said to him, that's not what they're asking for. So yeah, so I think the commercial, you need to be a lot more careful what you get into if you're moving into. I mean, I know Richard, you and I have been to view quite a few commercial units, so I know you know what you're looking for, so which is good. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's key to be very specific and look kind of medium to long term, exactly what Adam was saying. I was just curious about his view, but yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, thank you, Adam. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Sam.
Very welcome, Richard. Very welcome. And I think you raised a really good point there as well, in as much as how diverse, when people say, oh, are you into commercial property? Should I get into commercial? That's such a broad, I mean, it's broader than resi. There are so many different kinds of commercial, sizes of commercial, types of tenant. You could be talking about industrial, you could be talking about so many different things. It's well worth, drilling down and, as you say, being specific and getting to the granular details of it. Definitely. So that's a good point, guys.
Okay, good.
Hi, Sam. Can I join in?
Yes, please go.
Yeah, my question is about the industrial units and warehouses. What do you think about them, Adam?
I think there's probably, they've had a really, really good 4 or 5 years, mostly because of all these distribution centres that have been popping up more and more and more. Going back to the conversation we were just having, that this current climate is going to accelerate that even more, because people are going to be ordering more and more stuff online, some of it because of necessity, some of it because of boredom. And so that makes even more sense that more and more of these units are going to be needed over time. And I think, I know a few people who got into commercial property by cutting their teeth by doing some smaller industrial units or chopping up bigger industrial units into smaller units. So it's effectively running the HMO model, just as the HMO model in an office might be a serviced office or a co-working space or whatever. The HMO model in industrial might be just taking a big unit and chopping it down into lots of small units if there's a particular demand for that sort of stuff. There's lots of, as the high streets get tougher and tougher for the retailers, a lot of the industrial spaces make sense because they might be paying a quarter or a fifth of the rent they were paying on the space, but they can bring their business online. They're doing their business through Instagram, they're doing their business through Facebook. So there's lots and lots of reasons, from the small, very small light industrial units all the way up to the bigger warehouses, site finding, stuff like that. And I mean, this whole, even there's a temporary compression now of forcing people down the route of e-commerce, of the people who didn't necessarily want to go down that route. But ultimately, I think we'll see from this whole coronavirus thing that it will inspire permanent behavioural change in people. And ultimately what will happen is that will accelerate the rate at which the demand for this sort of stuff grows. So I think there's probably a few years expansion left in that sector right now. So it wouldn't be, normally I'd be the first person to say, look, it's 4 or 5 years of really good growth. I'd be cautious, but it looks like you're still quite near the bottom of the curve on that stuff. So bear in mind that I don't go out buying that stuff myself. So that's just my feel.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, so anyone else who've I think there's still about 15 of us in the networking room right now. Do you just want to say what you do? Who do you have? Vivi? Yeah, Vivi. So got someone here called Vivi. Do you want to just tell us what you do, Vivi?
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, hello everyone.
Hi.
The V is actually for Veronica, and what I do is manage service apartments as well as find properties for clients or people who are looking either for developments or they're looking at simple refurbishment.
Okay.
I do this in London as well as outside of London in South Yorkshire, Sheffield primarily. And the reason that London is in it or included, until 2017, I lived in London for a number of years. So I do know that patch.
Okay.
So hopefully that is helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's good. So how are you finding the current situation right now? Has it affected your business? Do you expect it to affect you at all?
I'd say yes, it has affected the short-term let in a negative way, in that those who are on the call or who in the networking room would know that if you're on the 2 main booking platforms, you certainly would have had lots of cancellations over the recent past, the past week and a half.
Like this. Okay.
No?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yes.
No, I just thought someone else was about to comment. So yes, it has affected in that way. And there's actually, so I mentioned London and Sheffield, but I also have an arrangement with a company that I would find properties elsewhere, especially rental properties. So there was actually a case in point where there was a property in Nottingham that had been sourced for service apartments. And the landlord was quite happy to have a 3 or 5 year company rental or corporate let on the property, but investors are nervous in terms of taking those on board. On the other side, in terms of the development side, it was interesting when I heard you speaking, Sam, about London, because I had a client since late last year who was actually looking for central London properties, but he wasn't looking at, or the company wasn't looking at a development per se. They wanted a property or a set of apartments that would have cash flowed. So when you were talking about the strategy of HMO owners, running it for a year or two, demonstrating the cash flow and then selling on, that resonated with me, because this client was actually looking for that type of property, much larger than an HMO, but the whole idea that it was just generating income. Central London is tough to get 5-6% return on investment, and well, as far as I'm aware, and so it was that sort of level they were looking at. So I think I am optimistic in terms of surviving or riding through this particular period, because in the short term, there's some opportunities. So there's actually a client that will be on board in the next few weeks who is looking for management. So part of my business is also managing service accommodation. Okay. So it means that we're looking at that because that is a larger type HMO, fairly high level product, but we'd be looking at marketing that to a particular set of travelers, business groups. Okay. And so late in the year, it would also be looking at auction type properties in terms of developments as a way of moving forward with the property side of the business. So I'm still optimistic despite the challenging period that we're going through now and the waters being quite rocky.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, I think it is the right spirit to have, and I think this is going to be a short term, and we'll all see it through. So yeah, and like I said, we'll just keep it going, and okay. Anyone else? Anyone with a comment? Is there anyone else that's got a comment, or should we call it a day and end the networking? Let me just see who else is here. That maybe I'm muting them. Patrick, Sue, Jay, Vivi. I think almost everyone that's on here has spoken and said something. Actually, we've got K Smith. K Smith. Then, do you want to say who you are, K Smith?
Hey.
Hello. Hi. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've muted you. So, okay, you're on now. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a London-based landlord with a small portfolio of single lets, and thinking of just making some adjustments this year and moving forward into a bit of development and perhaps HMOs. Not too strong on HMOs, but maybe just more single lets and just different strategies.
Okay. Okay. So when you say London, what about in London? Are your properties?
Well, I'm London-based, but my majority of my portfolio is in Manchester, which was bought pre-crash 2008.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm no longer working in Manchester now. I'm more based down in London. So I've got a bit of equity up north and a bit of capital to move forward, perhaps in London and surrounding areas like South Hertfordshire, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, Manchester is a great place, especially those. I mean, I bought in Manchester as well from about 2003, 2004. It's fantastic. Or rented. You can.
Great yields.
So easy to find tenants. The yields are great, but I'm not sure if there's any more capital growth. Well, it hasn't been for a while, but maybe in the future it might. We might get some capital growth again in Manchester. But Manchester is certainly a very interesting place that most people are going to. Where are you looking to expand to? In London?
Yeah. Now, I mean, I bought these places like between 2006 and 2008 when I didn't have children and so much commitments in London. So traveling for me is not something I'd want to do, and I want to make use of any opportunities in London and anything near me.
Okay.
You're talking about South Hertfordshire, that's my patch, but it tends to be a bit of a strong market and there's not a huge amount going on. Sam's got quite a few opportunities if there are any.
Yeah, no, I think if you look generally, say, looking through the auctions, I mean, there's one lot, say, in the last lot on network auction. It's a flat, it's a big house, just around the corner from, I think, Tooting Station, one of the South London Northern lines. And that's on for about, what, 650 guide. It's currently configured as two-bed flats and a one-bedroom flat. It's guided so low that it's a fantastic. It's been that way for over 10 years. So, but you should do your research. So that is one that I haven't looked at that lot closely enough, but it just you can certainly see a two-bedroom flat in that area that's going for about maybe 350, 400,000. So it looks so cheap on paper, but if you do acquire that, you can get maybe established use, two bedroom flats and a 1-bedroom flat quite quickly. So that will be a very good auction lot to actually look into if you are looking at London. But yeah, the
I'd
auction,
take that one.
yeah, it's a good. If you look at it, it's quite easy. Network auction, the last lot on it, so you can get out for get that tip for free. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Toby and I go back a long way, Sam. I've known him 30 years or so.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
about
No.
things like permitted development, like buying houses and you turning them into splitting them into flats and things like that? Even things like retrospective planning. Have you guys ever dabbled in things like that?
Yeah. The problem I have before Adam kicks in is that in terms of buying properties in London and converting them to flats, it's very difficult right now to buy, convert into flat, and then it makes financial sense unless you can have a big enough house for 4 units or more. Because if you buy a typical 3-bed semi in London for 450, 500,000, if you spend about 100,000 to do it up, 2 flats, how much do you get out of it, given all the risks in the project? So London, to actually buy right now in London, convert to 2 flats is quite risky. I don't know. See, what are your thoughts on this?
Some of them, of course, they have a minimum size for the house as well. They won't let you convert a house that's too small.
Yes, that's definitely Brent Brent Council. There's a minimum house size, and then with Harrow,
Some of the South London as well, yeah.
Yeah, both flats must have access to the garden, so you can't even do a terrace house. It has to be an end terrace or semi-detached. So once with all those restrictions, if you're going to buy for about 550, 600, and then you spend 150,000 doing it, then you end up with 2 flats. You start thinking, it's absolutely tight unless you happen to find the right house that's very run down. So you're really buying it at the lowest possible price, and then it might just work for that. Then because I've got a client that's just done one in NW10. He bought it from auction, which I did a disposal for Brent Council. It was so competitive. I had about 130 people come for the viewing. He bought it for 570. He spent the house was burnt out. He finally spent over 200,000 to do it up. So it's got it's actually configured as 2 3-bed flats, but his plan is for 2 2-bed flats, so they can big enough footprint to make into three beds, unofficially, of course. But if you look at it, that's what almost 800,000 that is spent to get 2 flats. That's how tight the London market is. So buying right now, converting it to flats, you have to be very lucky to find the right property to do that. So
if I can just add to that, Sam, I'd say that from my experience, there are a couple of South London boroughs that I know of that weren't encouraging because it wasn't part of their development plan, converting houses into flats because their concern was that they had lost enough houses and they were focusing on getting families housed. So they wanted to keep more of their houses, so they weren't encouraging or accepting applications for flats. And they were also looking at when they were larger developments, maybe 8, 9, 10 units, they wanted to ensure that they had at least a 3-bedroom in that set because they weren't happy with just 1 or 2 bedrooms. So I think you also need to consider what the specific boroughs require. As I said, this is drawing on my experience of a couple of South London boroughs.
And it's going to be full planning, so it's not permitted development if you're starting with resi.
I think it's probably also worth mentioning. I've done quite a few of the buying stuff that's been converted without permission, potentially without building regs, all the rest of it. That's one of the things that tends to trade. I'm talking about outside of the M25 now, because it's just a much more sophisticated market inside the M25. But outside of the M25, you can quite often pick up really good deals like that. The difficulty can be your change of lawful use directives. and that really comes down to every individual council and knowing what they'll accept. Some of them will accept a stat deck from the previous vendor, for example, so that's something you might be able to negotiate even before an auction or whatever. Some of them will want a much more comprehensive audit trail in order to grant the permission, grant the change of lawful use. So it can be super profitable because it's one of those things that people look at and don't necessarily understand that well. And of course, you don't have that massively high entry point that Sam was also talking about there. And what you also tend to end up with, which is really what attracted me to it in the first place, is you end up with stuff that yields really, really strongly as well. And I'm not saying on these small buildings in the more provincey areas, there isn't any mileage in title splitting them. You're not going to create any value by creating a freehold and a management company and all the rest of it, as you might do in London. But there's still quite a lot of uplift there potentially, and really it's more paper pushing than it is doing lots and lots of work. So I kind of like the ones that have been, as long as they've been converted reasonably well, they look right, and you can do your initial due diligence. I quite like those as properties to hold.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really good building regs, and really good finishes, and you do more than what's required, sort of thing, in terms of getting retrospective planning. That's what I was more interested in.
Yeah, and it can, I mean, to be honest, again, that is going to come down to the local council. So there are some councils where they're quite happy to write down, look, to be honest, we don't really care. It's been like that we had that in a building. So we were looking to purchase a building. This was a pub that was converted into 11 flats about 20 years ago. Actually, it was probably, I think it was in the 90s, actually. It now, as its life, lives as 7 flats, which are not massive. A couple of them are under 30 square metres, and the rest of them are between 30 and 40 square metres. So I dread to think what size the 11 flats were. But it's lived its life for over the last 10 years as 7 flats. The purchaser, when he bought it, got none of the planning, none of the building regs, none of anything, converted it from 11 to 7, and has run it 7 flats for, I think it was 14 years. We'd made him a reasonable offer. We were buying it on a yield basis because it was in a place where we've got some lettings infrastructure already, so it made sense for us. It wasn't an incredibly discounted deal, but it had a bit of discount and it had a really strong yield. And he was unwilling to get the planning. Were quite happy to document in writing. They weren't really bothered, and it was fine because they knew he'd used it for over 10 years as it was. Building control were different, and the lender was insistent, as you can imagine, on a building regularisation completion certificate, and the vendor just, for whatever reason, didn't want to get the building certificate. And I said to him, well, look, ultimately the alternative is to put this into auction. And he said, well, I can put it in. It was rent passing 31k. We were buying it for 275, so it's 11% yield. But in honesty, yeah, but it's in the East Midlands, so it's not, I mean, it's a good yield, don't get me wrong. That's why we were buying it. But it was probably worth, you'd struggle to say it was worth 325. It's probably worth 300 just on a bricks valuation. And he couldn't be bothered to get the building regs. So I said, well, look, if you haven't got the building regs for this, my offer would genuinely be 200 grand cash, because it's going to be a bloody nightmare for me to sort it out and refinance it and all the rest of it. I didn't really mean that. I thought that was a bit harsh, but I thought that would sort of push him in the right direction. And he couldn't be bothered to get the certificate. And ultimately, this was about 3 weeks ago. The deal's now fallen over, and I suppose his attitude is, look, it's yielding. It doesn't matter to me. But he's sitting on an asset that may or may not be going down in capital value right now. So more fool him.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Any more comments? Any Are you saying okay? Okay. If
Take care.
comment, I think goes well. Adam. thank you. It's been a marathon from 7 to what time is it? 10, quarter past 10. So it's been a whole.
Good innings, Sam. Good innings.
Yeah, good evening. No, it's been fantastic. My first experience. I totally forgot to go to Facebook Live until like almost quite late on. Actually, I went Facebook Live, but hey, now I need to get my script right next time. Get everything in order.
You've done well. You've done well. Don't worry, it's gone well.
That's my first Zoom, so well done. Thank you all. Sue, V, Richard, Patrick. Yeah, thank you all. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys on next week on the 25th. We've got Simon Zucchi and a few and a lawyer. There's a tax person as well. So and an architect. So we've got a panel of 4. So at least today, I'll have some practice today. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.